Chapter 151. This one is honored. The light wind sword nimbly flew through the air as if it had a mind of its own before returning to Jian Chen's hand once more. Jian Chen held out his arm to catch the light wind sword as it flashed toward him in a silver ray of light. It was already dripping with blood, but the tip of its blade could still be seen gleaming. Just as the light wind sword returned to his hand, the blood on the blade of the sword, almost as if it was alive, began to concentrate at the sword's tip. Drop by drop it fell onto the dusty ground below as the previously bloody light wind sword became clear once more. The seemingly mirror-like metal reflected light off of the blade and radiated a hazy white glow of silver light. The forest was basked within its glow and would have dazzled the eyes of anyone that saw it. Sweeping his eyes over the mercenaries, he used his light wind sword to poke at the bodies before taking their space belts away. Carrying the space belts, he walked on over to a clean area to sit down. As he walked over, he continued to pick up the space belts of the dead Zhou mercenaries, and in a short moment, he had accumulated a small pile of space belts. After he had collected every single space belt and piled them together, Jian Shen absorbed the light wind sword back into his body. One by one, Jian Shen began to inspect the items within the space belts for the money and monster cores and letting it stack up into a single pile. In a few moments, the 40 space belts had been inspected and by Jian Chen's side, there was a small pile of monster cores and money. There were a total of 300 monster cores. Most of them were Class 2 monster cores with a Class 3 monster core for every 10 Class 2 monster cores. But there wasn't a single Class 4 monster core to be seen. Half of the stack of coins in the pile were copper and silver coins, with the golden coins taking up a small amount of it to make a total of 500 coins between the three. There were around 50 purple coins, and in total, the cumulative amount of wealth from this pile would be equal to around 70 purple coins. Disliking the poor sum of money, Jian Shen stored both the monster cores and money into his own space belt. Leaving behind the dead bodies of the Zhou mercenaries along with their space belts, Jian Shen left the area. Everything that remained in their space belts was just useless junk, as every single valuable had been taken by Jian Shen. Jian Shen didn't go too far, and instead hid himself on top of a large tree. He knew that there were mercenaries trying to find him so that they could take him back to the Tianxiong clan for the reward. However, because the magical beast mountain range was so large and the terrain within so complicated, even if they were to have men every 100 meters, it would still be hard to find him. The amount of time it would take to find another group of mercenaries would be too pitiful if he were to wait elsewhere. On the mountain range, every single mercenary was still trying to get to this area. The Zhou mercenaries were the first group that had reached this place. Not too long after, from his hiding spot, Jian Shen spotted yet another group of mercenaries coming in his direction. This group only had 10 people, a vastly different amount than the previous Zhou mercenaries' numbers. However, Jian Shen could sense that this group was filled with Saint Masters. Their group strength wasn't weaker than the Zhou mercenaries at all. Just as the group of mercenaries walked under the tree Jian Shen was hiding in, he suddenly jumped down from his perch. Landing gently on the ground, he suddenly sped toward the group with the light wind sword in his hand as he stabbed forward with a tremendous amount of sword chi flowing from his blade. The 10 mercenaries had immediately reacted when Jian Shen had started his movement, but Jian Shen's speed was much faster than their reaction speed and he had already closed the gap between them. With his light wind sword, he thrust it out in a great streak of light as it stabbed into the right shoulder of one of the mercenaries. At the same time, every single one of the mercenaries had already pulled out their saint weapons as they snarled in anger. The mercenaries in the back began to run forward in hopes of trapping Jian Shen within a circle. Jian Shen pulled out his sword from the man's right shoulder and immediately put himself into a defensive position as the Saint Masters all slashed down at him. Like a silver viper, the light wind sword flashed forward toward another mercenary. The targeted mercenary hastily brought up his sword to block the strike, but with the light wind sword being so fast, his defenses were quickly overwhelmed, and he was ultimately stabbed through the right shoulder. "You're seeking death." Seeing one of their own take damage, every other mercenary became furious as even more saint force entered their saint weapons. Without mercy they continued their pursuit toward Jian Shen with their saint weapon. Jian Shen flew back 10 meters in a nimble manner, causing the sword strikes to hit nothing but air. The other remaining saint weapons crashed into the floor, causing a large crater to form. Jian Chen's right hand held his sword as the tip of it pointed downward toward the ground while his eyes stared at the mercenaries. To dare attack us so underhandedly, you must be tired of living, you bastard. A big sturdy person cursed as he lifted his gigantic two-handed sword up to swing down at Jian Chen. Bantu. Before that man could take a step forward, another middle-aged man came up to block him. The one named Bantu stared angrily at the one blocking him, Mu Jian. Don't you block me, did you not see that bastard injure Hato and Eric? The one named Mu Jian shook his head as he ignored Bantu to look at Jian Chen. Fellow friend, I don't know what reason you might have suddenly attack us. You are here to find and capture the one called Jian Chen. Jian Chen said. Hearing this, the one named Mu Jian looked at the light wind sword in Jian Chen's hands. As if he realized something, his face underwent a huge change as he cried out, Could you be Jian Chen then? That's right, I am Jian Chen. Jian Chen smiled, but it was an otherworldly type of smile. Hearing that, the 10 mercenaries looked at each other with an excited look on their faces. They didn't think that they would be able to find Jian Chen, but to find him here, if they were able to capture him, then the 10,000 purple coins reward would be theirs. However, instead of a happy look on Mu Jian's face, there was only an expression of concentration. So you're Jian Chen, this is too, stop talking. Just as one mercenary was about to burst out into a smile and say something, Mu Jian had immediately cut him off. Glaring at him, Mu Jian turned back to Jian Chen and cupped his hands together. I did not think honored one here would be the honored Jian Chen known for his military prowess. This one here is named Mu Jian. To be able to see the elegant and honored Jian Chen, this is truly a blessing enough for 3 lifetimes. Chapter 152, Indecision. Jian Chen laughed and spoke. You praise me too much, honored Mu Jian truly praises me too much. I suppose your group of men entered the magical beast mountain range to find me as well. That's correct, we came to capture you. The one Mu Jian was holding back had spoken out loud. Hearing the man speak, Mu Jian's face changed before staring angrily at the man behind him. On the man's face was a look of confusion and did not understand what was happening. Mu Jian cupped his hands together as he faced Jian Chen once more and laughed. Honored Jian Chen, this one and my friends did indeed enter the magical beast mountain range, but it was to watch the excitement. We never had the idea of trying to capture the honored Jian Chen. I hope that you won't misunderstand us. Misunderstand? Jian Chen couldn't help but laugh. If I didn't hear incorrectly, then I just heard your friend over there say your group wanted to capture me. For this reason, how could I not misunderstand you? Hearing this, Mu Jian had an embarrassed look on his face. When they entered the magical beast mountain range, they really did want to capture Jian Chen. Although they had heard about Jian Chen's strength and how so many Saint Masters had died by Jian Chen's hands, they had thought it was a rumor. Every man had always mistrusted rumors, and Mu Jian and his group was no different. But the moment Mu Jian had personally seen Jian Chen's strength, he could see that none of his companions could be an opponent for Jian Chen. Even if they had the superiority in numbers, that didn't mean a guaranteed capture of Jian Chen without them taking on heavy losses as well. He was also truly aware that if Jian Chen had been serious in taking the lives of his companions, they would have long since been lying down on the ground. Because of that, Mu Jian had already given up on thinking about trying to capture Jian Chen. At this very moment, he didn't want to enter a conflict with Jian Chen, otherwise, they would take on heavy losses. Seeing the silent Mu Jian, Jian Chen spoke up once more. I don't wish to kill the innocent randomly. If you hand over all of the monster cores within your space belts, then you can purchase your life back. If you don't, however, then don't blame me for being merciless. Suddenly, a glint of murderous intent made it to Jian Chen's eyes. Hearing this, every single one of the mercenaries revealed an angry yet disdainful expression. Among the 10, no one except for Mu Jian had that clear expression of understanding. Jian Chen, you're a despicable person that only knows how to use dirty tricks. What qualifications do you have to say something like that? Come and eat Uncle's sword. Jian Chen's words had angered many of the people there, and immediately, the sturdy man behind Mu Jian had brought out his giant sword in anger as he charged at Jian Chen. Hold up. Mu Jian tried to block the man without caring for the anger in his eyes. Turning around to look at Jian Chen, he spoke, Jian Chen, we became enemies by accident. Could it be you're still going to force us in this way? Jian Chen began to laugh coldly. I already told you. Leave behind your monster cores, and you may go. Otherwise, I won't stay my hand. He paused for a moment before he said, however, if you make a move against me and suffer casualties, don't blame me. Jian Chen's words had left no room for argument, causing Mu Jian to feel extremely gloomy as he said, it's just as they said, everything must be given up without a word. Honored Jian Chen, you're being too excessive. One space belt was filled with the monster cores that they had risked their own lives to attain from killing magical beasts and accumulated after a long period of time. Mu Jian knew that if he were to fight with Jian Chen, then there would definitely be a loss, but at the same time, giving all of his hard-earned monster cores to Jian Chen was an impossible thing. Mu Jian, what are you doing spouting bullshit with him? Hurry up and capture him, he wants to take all of our monster cores by himself, what a huge joke that is. A golden-haired man spoke with a huge amount of disdain. Jian Chen, although you've injured 2 of our brothers, that was only because you had attacked us from behind. There's 10 of us, so that doesn't mean someone like you could be an opponent of ours. At the very most, the end result would be both sides taking on heavy injuries, but that won't be much damage to our side. On the other hand, if you take on heavy injuries, that would make things very disadvantageous for you. After all, there's many people crawling about in the magical beast mountain range who are here to capture you. To us, this isn't anything to worry about, but to you, this is a struggle between life and death, so asking for us to hand over our monster cores to you is an impossible task. The one who spoke was a sturdy person. Clearly, he knew that Jian Chen's strength wasn't all that weak either. Jian Chen's eye flashed with a cold glare as he raised his light wind sword. So it's like that, all that's left to do is fight then, he said as he charged toward the 10 people. Mu Jian didn't say anything more and held his sword. Charging with the other mercenaries, everyone prepared to fight Jian Chen. All 10 of these people had the strength of a Saint Master, and in the past, if Jian Chen were to fight against these 10 Saint Masters, he would be at a huge disadvantage. But right now, his strength was well over the level of the surrounding Saint Masters and he could handle them with ease. Using the profound steps to defend himself against the attacks from the Saint Masters and retaliating, both the mercenaries and Jian Chen were evenly matched. Despite the disadvantage Jian Chen had for being alone, not too long later, the mercenaries were slowly losing their advantage. A good amount of times the mercenaries had almost been pierced straight through their necks by Jian Chen, but they would also dodge to the side at the most crucial moment. However, they had already been stabbed multiple times by Jian Chen's sword. Jian Chen was like a demon possessed as he flashed throughout the crowd. Each time he disappeared and reappeared, he would attack from almost every direction with the light wind sword that emitted a strong amount of sword chi. The light wind sword danced as it flew through the air. The sounds of it traveling through the air could be heard clearly as it concentrated its attack in one straight line. PCH. The light wind sword's tip sharpened by the sword chi stabbed into the joint of a mercenary's right arm. At the same time, the light wind sword bore straight through his body, causing the arm to lose all functionality. That man began to shriek out in agony as the sword in his hand disappeared into thin air. His right arm had been completely skewered, causing him to lose any fighting strength he had since he could no longer hold a weapon. Bang! Jian Chen's kicked the man firmly in the abdomen, causing him to fly backward. Swaying his body to the side, he dodged another strike that came at him. At the same time, he lashed out with his sword at the man, causing him to panic. Immediately taking advantage of the hasty parry, Jian Chen immediately stabbed him through the right shoulder. Chapter 153, Meeting another great Saint Master. The injury to the right shoulder had impacted the man's ability to swing his sword. The man who was struck through the shoulder had felt an injury so grave that it was beyond anything he had ever felt. Because of the sword chi-enhanced sword tip, when the light wind sword stabbed through his right shoulder, his entire right arm had lost functionality as well as fighting ability. The injured members could only helplessly retreat while Jian Chen advanced forward to fight the other mercenaries. The sounds of Saint weapon clashing against Saint weapon could be heard constantly as the Saint force from everyone mixed in with everyone else's. The Saint force had even reached a point where the nearby grass was flattened while the dirt from the ground flew up in one giant dust cloud, covering everyone's figure. Every so often the miserable sounds of pain could be heard as yet another person was kicked into the air. Each figure was soaked with blood and had injuries all over their bodies. Not too long later, the previously 10 mercenaries had been reduced down to a small handful. Jian Chen's figure had been constantly slashing at his opponents in a fierce manner, but there was not even a single wound to be seen anywhere on his body. Blocking the downward slash of a sword, Jian Chen's light wind sword streaked forward and stabbed into the right shoulder of another mercenary. I don't wish to slaughter the innocent, so I'll give you one last chance to go. If you remain stubborn like this, then don't blame me anymore. Jian Chen called out without any emotion, but it could be seen that there was a killing intent within his eyes. He had been very lenient until now, but because they were so stubborn, he had no choice but to kill them. This was a very common thing on the Tianyuan continent, so Jian Chen didn't think he was at fault. After all, this world obeyed the primal laws of the jungle, and so the strong held all of the power. The weak would never have any say in this world. If any mercenary were to come into the magical beast mountain range, they were there just to capture Jian Chen and bring him back to the Tianxiong clan for the bounty, and these 10 mercenaries in front of him were no different. If it weren't for the fact that Jian Chen was stronger than them, these mercenaries wouldn't have been so unwilling to fight him at first. Hearing this, the one called Mu Jian revealed the struggle he was having within his mind as he looked at his heavily injured and weakened mercenaries. Biting his lip, he finally yelled out, "Stop!" Mu Jian didn't have a weak amount of prestige among this group of mercenaries. The moment he had spoken, every single mercenary had immediately jumped backward and looked with fear at Jian Chen and his slender light wind sword. His sword was so fast that it had caused even them to be extremely afraid. During their battle with Jian Chen, there were many times that the light wind sword had almost struck them, only to be saved by their nearby comrades at the very last moment. Mu Jian continued to look at Jian Chen with a complicated look, but seeing the amount of blood that was leaking down from his light wind sword, he suddenly became dejected and said helplessly, "Everyone take out your monster cores. Honored Jian Chen has already been merciful toward us. If we don't follow his demands this time, then simple injuries won't be the end of our problems." This time, none of the mercenaries had any thoughts of disagreeing. With a dejected look on their faces, they silently began to pull out all of their remaining monster cores from their space belts and piled them up on the ground. After that short exchange, they all knew that even with 10 people, they were not enough to be classified as an opponent for this youth. With his extremely fast sword strokes and ability to defend so quickly, they simply had no way of attacking or resisting. These 10 Saint Masters had many monster cores on them. Although they didn't have many Class 3 monster cores, they still had plenty of Class 2 monster cores. "Jian Chen, this is all of the monster cores we have. That means we can go now, correct?" Mu Jian spoke with an ugly expression. Jian Chen looked at the pile of monster cores on the ground with an involuntary smile on his face. If you had just given the monster cores earlier, then all of this could have been avoided. That's fine, although I, Jian Chen, cannot call myself a gentleman, I am a man who keeps his promises. You can go. Mu Jian spared one last look at the small pile of monster cores on the ground, a look of reluctance. With a helpless sigh, Mu Jian and his friends could only leave this place behind. Although the pile of monster cores wasn't a lot relatively speaking, it was all the Saint Masters had. Remember, I don't wish to see you come and face me again, otherwise, I will definitely not be as merciful. You would best do to leave the magical beast mountain range immediately. As the 10 mercenaries walked away, Jian Chen had called out to them before they could get too far. Hearing this, Mu Jian had stopped for only a second, but he didn't say anything. Quickly after, he disappeared into the forest. Jian Chen recollected his light wind sword and calmly walked toward the pile of monster cores. Bending down to store all of it into his personal space belt, he had counted that there were around 200 monster cores. A good amount of the cores were Class 2, but there were around 20 Class 3 monster cores. Just as Jian Chen had finished cleaning up all of the monster cores, he slowly straightened his back and gave a cold smile. "Fellow friend, you've been here for some time and seen quite enough. Isn't it time for you to come out?" "Ha ha ha ha." Just as Jianchen finished talking, a loud voice came out from the forest. Afterward, a gray shadow flew out from within and landed 20 meters away from where Jianchen stood. The person who came was rather old. His age was around 50 to 60 years old. His face was rather red as he looked at Jianchen with a lively expression. Judging by how disorderly his silver hair was, the man was rather unconventional with his looks. He wore a gray robe and was taller than Jianchen by a large amount, and even though he was standing on the ground with no unusual posture, Jianchen could feel an indomitable pressure enshrouding him. Seeing this elder, Jianchen couldn't help but heighten his guard as his face grew more serious. Staring deeply at the elder, he spoke 3 words, "Great Saint Master." The elder laughed, "Little baby, I didn't think you'd be able to tell this old man's strength." "Not bad, not bad. Truly not bad. It would appear you have some strength. It is no wonder that old bastard Tianxiong wasn't able to capture you." Chapter 154, Killing a Great Saint Master, Part 1. Jianchen sucked in a deep breath. Although he had long since guessed that the chances of a great Saint Master coming after him for the 10,000 purple coins were quite large, he didn't think it'd be so soon. There was no fear within Jianchen's heart, although he couldn't say for sure that he could win against a great Saint Master expert. He had confidence that he could at least fight against one to some degree. At the same time, Jianchen was also secretly rejoicing. He was rejoicing his foresight that had told him to first cultivate until he was a Saint Master. If he hadn't, then if he were to come across a great Saint Master, he would have no choice but to try and escape. Against this elderly great Saint Master, Jianchen had felt a huge amount of pressure. Quickly, he had calmed himself down and stared at the elder with a barely calm expression. "Dear elder, could it be that you were also enticed by the 10,000 purple coins for my capture?" The baby asks a question he already knows the answer to. "This old one won't spare any talk with you. Come along with me quietly, or I'll do it myself. You must have realized by now that I am not like the previous 10 Saint Masters you just fought." The elder casually looked at Jianchen, but he did not see Jianchen as an opponent. Jianchen let out a sneer as the light wind sword reappeared within his right hand. As he grasped the hilt of the sword, the tip dragged against the ground as he spoke. "Waiting to be captured and delivered was never my style. Dear elder, this one thanks you for your smart idea." Suddenly, Jianchen disappeared into a blur with only the smallest of traces of his figure as he flew toward the elder. In a split second, the 20-meter gap between the two was quickly closed as the light wind sword began to emit a strong amount of sword chi and stabbed at the elder's throat. The careless expression on the elder's face was gone in an instant and was replaced by a serious one. His palm began to envelop with a strong amount of Saint force before condensing into a foot-long dagger. In the elder's hands, it shone coldly as it greeted the light wind sword's approach. The light wind sword and the elder's dagger collided against each other with a large sound. Immediately a large wave of Saint force emerged in waves from the impact and spread out in a circle around them in a manner that was noticeable to the naked eye. As it rippled away from the two fighters, the surrounding grass was immediately flattened as the wave of Saint force rippled over it. It had even kicked up a dust cloud from the ground and immediately caused visibility to be lowered. A slight hum could be heard from Jianchen's throat as he was forced to fly back a few meters. For every step, a deep imprint could be seen in the dirt. The strength of a great Saint Master is indeed very strong. I didn't think that even after making a breakthrough to the Saint Master level, there would still be such a wide gap between the two. Jianchen muttered. With this current exchange with the elder, it was Jianchen who had been at a disadvantage. After all, in a battle of strength with Saint force, how could Jianchen who was only at the Saint Master stage contend against the elder who was at the great Saint Master? Yet, Jianchen was also secretly delighted. After making contact with the elder, he had realized just how wide that gap in strength was, and how close he was to the elder's level, making him quite happy. On the other side, the elder's face grew even more serious as he looked at Jianchen and spoke solemnly. "The baby here seems to be quite complicated. It seems that if this old one wants to capture you, then this old one better put in more effort. Jian Chen's face carried a cold smile. Even if you do everything you can, you won't be able to capture me. The elder laughed with a chilling smile. The baby knows how to talk big, then allow this old one to observe and see just how strong you are. After he had finished speaking, the elder's dagger exploded with saint force. Following that explosion of energy, the elder suddenly disappeared and then abruptly reappeared right in front of Jian Chen with his dagger ready to pierce through Jian Chen's heart. Because the elder was a great saint master, Jian Chen didn't dare lower his concentration. The saint force within his body began to circulate and gather around the light wind sword within his right hand. Forming a white haze of sword chi over the blade, Jian Chen swung his sword at the incoming dagger. Suddenly, another explosion of energy could be seen as the shockwave was sent throughout the area. The dirt on the ground was sent flying into the air as the clash of saint force immediately pressed against the ground. Countless plants were uprooted and sent into the air. In one strike, Jian Chen was once again sent flying back a few steps while the elder was once again unaffected and instead chased after the retreating Jian Chen with his dagger aimed at Jian Chen's heart. Jian Chen's body shifted to the side, causing the dagger to harmlessly slice past his clothes. After, the light wind sword chi enshrouded the elder within and in a split second, he had lashed out 10 times with each sword stroke aimed at various parts of the elder's body. The elder brought back his dagger and brandished it in front of him, defending himself against the various strikes. Ding 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 ding, the sounds of the weapons clashing together could be heard as the light wind sword and dagger continuously hit each other in a split second. Suddenly, the elder retreated fiercely as the robe he was wearing was no longer in a completely intact state. On his chests there were a few scars that were leaking blood. From the other parts of his robes, a few strands and patches were already falling down to the ground. Even on top of his head, a few strands of his hair could be seen drifting in the wind after being cut. Right in front of him, Jian Chen did not look to be in a better state. Although there wasn't any injuries on his body, his face was a morbidly pale shade. Seeing how his clothes had been ripped apart in such a manner, the elder looked at Jian Chen with a calculating look. You really can't see a favor when it comes. Don't blame me when I don't show mercy then. Jian Chen only laughed. Many saint masters have died by my sword, but never could I claim to have killed a great saint master with my light wind sword. Today, you shall be the first. How arrogant. The elder snarled as he sped toward Jian Chen without any further words to be said. Chapter 155, Killing a Great Saint Master, 2. Without any fear, Jian Chen charged forward with his light wind sword and once more clashed fiercely with the elder. This time, Jian Chen had used his entire strength and profound steps to clash against the elder. Using his light wind sword to stab at the elder continuously, he simultaneously dodged each and every strike from his opponent. From the beginning of this new round, he had avoided clashing his weapon with the elder's, and it was only when it was impossible to dodge that he used his sword to defend. The elder's control over his dagger was superb, and it was almost as if he had reached the absolute pinnacle with his weapon. Almost as if each strike was an act of perfection, the dagger always flew straight toward Jian Chen's heart. The two fighters traveled back and forth throughout the area. Their movements had kicked up a strong breeze. Already, the breeze was starting to become a strong gale that threatened to uproot the surrounding grass and send it flying into the air. The two continued to go at each other, but under the fine control of Jian Chen, his own saint weapon had rarely crashed against the elder's dagger. With each passing moment, the elder was getting more and more depressed. He was feeling a deep pit of anger within himself. His strength was clearly higher than that of his opponent, but because his opponent had the slight advantage in speed and also boasted a superior reaction time, there were plenty of times when the elder was unable to find a solution to do anything. There were also many times where even with his saint master strength, the terrifyingly fast speed of the sword had left the elder at a critical junction between life and death. Little baby, you call yourself a male yet you fight an elderly person without hesitation to such a degree. Just what point is there to that? The elder barked out with anger as he couldn't handle this battle any longer. Hearing this, Jian Chen had a small smile on his face. To try to get an easy and short merit, this was an unwise choice. Do you think I am that foolish? The elder was temporarily stunned without saying a word. A flash of killing intent quickly passed through his eyes as he quickly leaped toward Jian Chen once more with his dagger ready to kill him. Knowing that the elder no longer had any idea of letting him live, Jian Chen's eyes flashed with a tint of coldness before increasing his speed by a notch. The amount of sword chi in the air intensified and looked as if the entire area was covered within its shroud, which made it almost impossible for the two to find each other. With the increased amount of strength on Jian Chen's part, the amount of pressure on the elder was increased many times over. Despite being a great saint master with a good amount of speed, he was unable to match Jian Chen in almost any aspect and was constantly put in a state of panic. Whoosh! At the same time, a sword chi's sharpened blade came out of the mist abruptly. The elder simply had no time to react, and so the sharp sword immediately cut through his right arm at the wrist. The pain from losing his right hand caused the elder to be stunned. Yet while he was stunned, the light wind sword had quickly flashed toward the elder's figure. The elder quickly held his dagger in his other hand in front of him to act as a form of defense as he tried to retreat backward. Suddenly, before he could get far, the elder came to a screeching halt as a bloody sword stabbed straight through his throat and protruded underneath his chin. He didn't know how or when Jian Chen had gotten behind him, only that his light wind sword had already stabbed straight through his throat, landing a killing blow. The elder's dazed eyes viewed the sword in his throat with a look of pure disbelief. He was utterly confused on how Jian Chen could sneak behind him without him noticing. Yet, the questions the elder had would never be answered as his body slowly locked up and fell to the ground. Both of his eyes grew wide and clouded over as a sign of death. Jian Chen pulled out his sword with a breath of air escaping from his lips. Fighting this great saint master had cost him a large amount of his energy, and after this fight, he was starting to breathe heavily. Absorbing his light wind sword into his body once more, he looked at the elderly figure on the floor. With a small sigh, he muttered, "To have dozens of years of cultivation destroyed in a single day, AI, there was no need for that. If only you didn't have greed seduce your heart into attacking me, you wouldn't have ended up like that." With that said, Jian Chen bent over to pick up the space belt on the elder and began to take out every item from within. The amount of monster cores within the elder's space belt didn't number more than the amount Jian Chen had, only having around 50 monster cores in total. However, the lowest ranked monster core was a Class 2 monster core. There was not a single Class 1 monster core in sight. Over half were Class 2 monster cores and 20 Class 3 monster cores. There was also a single Class 4 monster core. Aside from the monster cores, Jian Chen also counted around 70 purple coins worth of money. After storing the monster cores and purple coins within his space belt, Jian Chen turned over the space belt within his hand once more before realizing there was a piece of white fur within it. This piece of white fur was about the size of his palm. It was soft to touch and seemed extremely cozy to hold. There was also a warm sensation to it. This piece of fur, Jian Chen stared at the fur in his hand with some shock. Immediately throwing the space belt to the ground, he dove into his own space ring from within his space belt and took out a red embroidered pouch. This red pouch was the memento and family heirloom of the Bai clan that was handed down to him from his mother by Yuntian. Jian Chen's fingers nimbly opened up the pouch to take out the piece of white fur from within. His hands began to shake as he unfolded the piece of fur, only to see that the one from within the red pouch was also the size of his palm. As Jian Chen compared the two pieces of fur closely, his eyes widened more and more in shock. That was because these two pieces of fur were almost identical, even the texture of the fur was the same. From the looks of things, it was almost as if the two pieces of fur came from one single piece that was cut into multiple parts. Jian Chen's eyes looked back to the elder's resting body once more as his heart began to beat. The piece of fur from within the red pouch was the family heirloom of the Bai clan. To this day, the heirloom must have been well over 100 years old, and although he didn't know what use this piece of fur was for, the antiquity and price for it was clearly self-evident. To be treasured by the Bai clan whose accumulated strength had been wiped out in a single night, it was simple to see that this piece of fur would surely have a high price. At this moment, to unexpectedly find an identical piece of fur from this great saint master of an elder, Jian Chen couldn't help but wonder who this elder was. Chapter 156, Fearsome Reputation and Profit. Why did this elder have this piece of fur on him? just who was he? Jian Shen held the piece of fur in his hand as he contemplated this question. Perhaps he gained this piece of fur by coincidence. However, just what secret is this piece of fur hiding? Jian Shen muttered under his breath. He had accidentally found this piece of fur from the elder and thus had been tempted by this strange and curious new find. Could this be a type of treasure map with some sort of amazing martial arts written on it? Jian Shen pondered. Based on his previous experience from his past life, he quickly conjured up a few speculations. However, this piece of fur didn't have a single trace of impurity to it. There were absolutely no connections to be drawn to it. It appeared to be unrelated to a treasure map or any sort of unique martial art. Many times in the past did Jian Shen take out the piece of fur to study it. Under his eyes and hands, the fur was strong and flexible, and no matter how much strength he used, not a single strand of fur could be pulled from it. It wasn't like a normal piece of fur, so if there was a secret hidden within the fur, Jian Shen was utterly clueless. Forget it, it's best to forget about this for now. There'll be another time in the future for me to find out the secrets of this mysterious piece of fur. Pushing his curiosity away, Jian Shen placed the piece of fur back into the red pouch along with the piece from the elder back into his space ring. The space ring was then placed back into his space belt as well. Since Jian Shen wasn't able to figure out the mystery behind the pieces of fur, he didn't want to expend any additional mental energy to stay in such a place to find out more about it. Soon after, the elder's space belt was rummaged through once more. Finally, with one last look, Jian Shen didn't find any other valuable treasure, so he tossed it aside. Dusting his hands, Jian Shen left the area without another look back. After another few days, Jian Shen continued to find and capture any mercenary group that came across him. The amount of monster cores on him could be said to number up to a high amount, and whenever he saw a group of mercenaries he found interesting, he would let them go. For those who weren't pleasing to talk to, he would kill them. In those few days, the amount of mercenaries killed by Jian Shen couldn't be counted, and the amount of bodies that littered the magical beast mountain range was enormous. The scent of blood and death wafted throughout the mountain range, almost as if the scent of blood covered the entire area like an ocean. It went without saying that many people were tempted by the 10,000 purple coin reward by the Tianxiong clan. This time, there were many Saint Master experts within the mountain range along with a few strong great Saint Masters. Excluding the dagger-wielding elder Jian Shen had first met, there were another 4 great Saint Masters that he had come across. There were even 2 great Saint Masters that had come across Jian Shen along with 30 great Saints and Saint Master experts. That particular battle was extremely fierce. In the end, Jian Shen had expended a Herculean amount of strength in order to kill those 2 great Saint Masters, and many of the other great Saints and Saint Masters were killed off by Jian Shen. Jian Shen paid for the battle by having various wounds inflicted onto his body, and when a good amount of mercenaries had fled from him, Jian Shen was powerless to chase after them. Since Jian Shen could use the light saint force in the same way a radiant saint master could, he wasn't afraid of any injury, and so the numerous injuries on his body were healed without a single trace in less than 2 hours. Although the battle was extremely fierce, Jian Shen had gained an equally abundant reward. The 2 great saint masters had a total of 100 monster cores. There were very few Class 2 monster cores and a very large amount of Class 3 monster cores. There had even been 2 Class 4 monster cores stashed within. Although the amount of monster cores he had collected from the 2 great Saint Masters was a large quantity, the great Saint and Saint Master mercenaries accompanying the 2 only had a total of 30 monster cores. They must have belonged to the same mercenary group and given the majority of their monster cores to the 2 great Saint Masters. Another great Saint Masters he encountered didn't have any Class 4 monster cores, but he did have a decent amount of Class 3 monster cores. In comparison to the first encounter, there was only 20 Class 3 monster cores and 30 Class 2 monster cores. The last great Saint Master he met was extremely wretched. Jian Shen had only been able to collect 5 Class 3 monster cores and a single Class 2 monster core. Although he was a great Saint Master, he might as well be considered an experienced Saint Master. Now after Jian Shen's breakthrough to the Saint Master level, his fighting ability had been enhanced. Against a great Saint Master expert, he already had the capabilities to kill them, as long as he didn't come across a peak great Saint Master or one with an attributed Saint force. Jian Shen wouldn't need to fear the consequences of fighting against one. After these few days of killing mercenaries, aside from the two great Saint Masters who had inflicted many injuries on him, Jian Shen hadn't been too heavily injured against anyone else. After this indiscriminate massacre, Jian Shen's fearful name had spread far and wide to even beyond the mountain range, where many mercenaries had started to spread the news even farther away. By this point, Wake City wasn't the only area that had knowledge of Jian Shen. Even the surrounding cities knew of Jian Shen's terrifying name. Hearing the rumors flying about, many mercenaries still traveled from afar to the magical Beast Mountain range. Many mercenaries that wanted to capture Jian Shen gradually renounced their efforts. Every day many cowardly mercenaries could be seen retreating from the mountain range and abandoning the hunt. Despite having many mercenaries retreat from the mountain range, there were still many stronger mercenary groups that stayed within the area. After the weaker mercenaries left, there weren't many people left in comparison to when the hunt had begun, but all of the remaining members were of the Saint Master level at the very least. After a large amount of mercenaries had left the magical Beast Mountain range, the area had become peaceful once more compared to the chaotic atmosphere when everyone had wanted to capture Jian Shen. Even the mercenaries that were originally there to hunt and kill magical beasts for their monster cores were driven out from the area to avoid any trouble. Now that there were even less people than before, Jian Shen took the initiative instead of staying passive to find the remaining mercenaries. Regarding those mercenaries he found, he still used the same philosophy he always had. If they were to hand over their monster cores, then he would let them go without any harm without exception, but for those too stubborn to listen and still wanted to capture him, Jian Shen would kill them without exception. Within the cloudless sky, the fierce sun loomed overhead with its brilliant rays of light stabbing into the earth below almost as if it were putting a golden-colored carpet over it. Because of the recent summer weather, the sun had been unbearably hot. In the lush forests of the magical Beast Mountain range, it was almost like an isolated piece of the world. There were trees in every direction of the forest that blotted out the sun and its light. Every so often, the tree leaves would sway in the wind along with the tall grass underneath. While the outside area was hot, the forest within the magical Beast Mountain range was rather cool. Somewhere within the mountain range, 10 mercenaries sat in a circle with a bonfire in the center. Spiked on top of the fire were a few pieces of magical beast meat that slowly caramelized and dripped their juices into the fire below with the occasional sizzling sound. Although these 10 mercenaries were sitting down, their height and stature weren't hidden at all. Each one of them wore a thin layer of animal leather that had a few scratches from the thorns and thistles of the forest. "Captain, there's been many mercenaries that have left the mountain range with not many people left. At the same time, Jian Shen's strength has far surpassed our expectations. Just a few days ago I heard that a few great Saint Masters died by his hands as well. I think it would be for the best that we give up on this mission," one of the mercenaries said. Table of Contents. Chapter 157, Should We? Just as this one mercenary finished talking, another spoke up, "That's right, Captain. Although we haven't come across Jian Shen yet, on the road we've already seen over 100 corpses. After a closer look, most of them appear to be close friends within Wake City who are all above the Saint Master level. If Jian Shen can kill a group of Saint Master experts, then his own strength should be that of a great Saint Master at the very least. Even if we were to face off against him, it's not guaranteed that we'll capture him without any losses or serious casualties. I'm afraid that even our complete destruction might be a possible outcome." Hearing that mercenary, the other 10 mercenaries couldn't help but have serious expressions on their faces. This newfound information had sent their heads into a whirl as they realized that if they wanted to capture Jian Shen alive with their middle Saint Master strength, they would need more effort than they had thought. After all, with their formation, they were capable of going up against a great Saint Master, and the news given to them by the Tianxiong clan explicitly said that Jian Shen had only great saint strength. At the very best he would be at the Saint Master level, so at the very beginning, they hadn't bothered to take Jian Shen seriously. However, now that they had been wandering within the magical Beast Mountain range for a few days, news of Jian Shen's amazing prowess had reached their ears about how multiple great Saint Masters had died by his hand. Although they didn't believe these rumors at first, after seeing corpses litter the ground wherever they went had shaken their confidence. Right now, these 10 mercenaries were in an awkward position where it was difficult to call off the hunt. They wanted to capture Jian Shen, but at the same time, they worried about going against him. They wanted to retreat from the mountain range, but they were also unwilling to give up the 10,000 purple coin reward that had so enticingly tempted their hearts. "Captain, we should give up this mission. The fact that we've seen so many bodies on our paths is proof of Jian Chen's might. If we were to come across Jian Chen even with our numbers, we would still not be considered his opponent and would undoubtedly have many people die by his hands." A scarred middle-aged man spoke with fear prevalent in his eyes. "I second Yun Jibing's suggestion. Captain, while 10,000 purple coins isn't a small amount by any means, but it can't be spent if we're dead. If we die here, there isn't any point to money or enjoying any other worldly pleasure." Another tanned person spoke. Hearing these mercenaries speak up, a mercenary with a knife wound slowly nodded his head and said, "Fine then, let us get off of this mountain range." With that announcement, every other mercenary let out a breath of air in relief as the tense expressions on their faces loosened up a bit. "It's a shame that you cannot walk in the night." Suddenly, a moment after the mercenaries were happily rejoicing, another voice was heard. The new arrival of the voice had caused every mercenary to stiffen. "Who's there? Come out." The scarred mercenary called out as he stood up. At the same time, the other 10 mercenaries slowly stood up as well, staring cautiously at the dangerous area around them. Suddenly, a leather-wearing person slowly came walking out from behind the trees. This person had long black hair with a piece of tall grass keeping it in place. There were stains all over his skin as he walked forward, but no one could distinguish who he was. The 10 mercenaries collectively looked at this animal hide-wearing person as the knife-scarred mercenary yelled out, "Who are you?" The animal hide-wearing person began to smile with the shadows of the night still covering the rest of his facial features, but the smile could be seen clearly. "I'm the person you're looking for." Bewildered, not a single mercenary could react to this announcement besides having their faces pale abruptly. You, could you be that Jian Chen?" A man stuttered out. There was an expression of utter panic that had overtaken his face. The animal hide-wearing person nodded his head slowly with a smile. "That's right, I am Jian Chen." There was a miraculous expression on the mercenaries' face as they looked at Jian Chen, who stared right back at them. None of them had thought that the person they had been looking for all this time would suddenly appear right in front of them just as they had decided to retreat from the magical Beast Mountain range. If Jian Chen appeared a few days ago, these 10 mercenaries would have been overjoyed to see him and wouldn't have any hesitation. But now, at this moment, there was a wave of agony that smashed into their hearts. "Hand over all of the monster cores in your possession and you may leave. Otherwise, you will die here. I'll give you a few moments to consider your options." Jian Chen spoke out. His tone was unnaturally calm, but when these mercenaries heard him speak, their hearts all grew heavy. The 10 mercenaries looked at each other as the leader spoke up. "Honored Jian Chen, the moment you opened your mouth, you wanted us to give up our monster cores. Isn't that too much? After all, these monster cores were earned after so much hard work and risking our lives in order to get even just one more monster core," he said with an unwillingness. Right after hearing the rumors of Jian Chen killing multiple great Saint Master experts, the leader had given up on seeing Jian Chen as an enemy. Jian Chen laughed. "I don't care for that. Your time is up now. If you don't hand over your monster cores, then don't blame me for what happens next." Hearing this, the 10 mercenaries all grew unhappy. The leader hesitated for merely a moment before striding forward. "Honored Jian Chen, if you can defeat me within 5 moves, then I will hand over our monster cores. Otherwise, we will just end up in a complete stalemate." Jian Chen's eyes flashed dangerously for a moment as he looked at the leader. "Fine, I'll defeat you in 5 moves then." In an instant, an intense amount of Saint force appeared within his hand as a silver sword materialized. Everyone moved back. The middle-aged man waved his own Saint weapon, ready to slash at Jian Chen with the might of his two-handed sword. Chapter 158. 3 moves. Seeing Jian Chen and their leader brandishing their weapons, the other mercenaries began to move back to watch the two fight. The scarred mercenary clenched onto his Saint weapon as he stared firmly at Jian Chen. His face was unnaturally serious. Whether or not he would be able to keep his monster cores would be determined by this battle. Although it was impossible for a great Saint Master to defeat a peak Saint Master in 5 moves, Jian Chen's agreement to this duel had refreshed the mercenary's courage. With no hesitation in his step, he was motivated to try and accomplish the task. For this middle-aged man, the amount of pressure on him was tremendous. Alas, there was still a small amount of worry within his heart. With Jian Chen's simple agreement to this duel, would he try and eliminate him given an opportunity? Knowing this possibility, he still didn't dare to voice out his thoughts. He would just have to try it. While it was true he wanted to save his monster cores, he also wanted to test out Jian Chen's strength. Seeing how young he was, he didn't know how he could be as strong as the rumors said. Just how could someone who was barely over 20 years old kill a great Saint Master expert? The leader's face hardened into a serious expression while Jian Chen smiled and extended his hand. Come. Sparing any politeness, the saint force around the mercenary's great sword exploded with intensity as he charged toward Jian Chen. Jian Chen's body disappeared into a blur as he rushed toward the man with his light wind sword ready to stab at him in a brilliant gleam of silver light. Seeing Jian Chen's sword disappear, the mercenary's pupils contracted in surprise as he suddenly whipped his great sword down to where he thought the light wind sword would appear. Ding! The sound of steel striking against steel could be heard as the two saint weapons were entangled together in a fierce stalemate. A wave of saint force exploded out from the swords and swept over the area like a gale-storm. Just as the saint weapons collided with each other, the mercenary's face began to change as his eyes widened in shock. The seemingly slender and thin sword contained such a disproportionate amount of saint force, causing his giant sword to tremble and his arms to go numb. To end up in a deadlock against me with such a slim one-handed sword, it would appear the rumors were not as empty as I thought. The mercenary muttered under his breath. Just as the mercenary was thinking to himself, the second strike was already coming at a faster pace than the first one. Becoming even more serious than before, the mercenary was barely given enough time to react to Jian Chen's sword. Trying to resist the numb sensation within his arms, he raised his sword horizontally to block the light wind sword. The moment the light wind sword stabbed into the great sword, an incredible amount of power was transmitted through the sword into the mercenary behind it, who was forced a few steps back. As for the sword in his hands, it had started to tremble and shake under the pressure. You've already lost. Just as the mercenary finally regained his stability, another voice came from behind. Whipping around, the man's face grew pale and sweat began to gather on his forehead as he saw what was behind him. Pointing right behind him was an amazingly thin sword that was only centimeters away from his body. The tip of that sword was already pointing straight at his throat. The man's face grew sluggish as he looked at the sword threatening to pierce his throat in disbelief. There was just simply no words he could say. At this sudden reveal, the other 10 mercenaries behind the two fighters also looked on in disbelief. Their eyes revealed a sluggish look as they saw the sword calmly pointing at their leader's neck. Not a single of them had anything to say. This is the third move, you've lost. Taking back the light wind sword, Jian Chen looked at the mercenary with a calm face. 3 moves. Jian Chen had only used 3 moves to defeat a peak Saint Master. The leader quickly looked at Jian Chen with a fearful face. Swallowing, his voice began to stutter as he said, what fa? Fast sword. Jian Chen gave a faint laugh. You should know what to do right about now. The fear in the leader's eyes quickly calmed down as he looked at Jian Chen. Although Jian Chen was completely covered by filth, the mercenary could see how young Jian Chen really was. The man absorbed his sword back into his body and cupped his hands together. I thank Honored One for his mercy. Then turning to walk back to the other mercenaries, he spoke out in a low voice, everyone take out all your monster cores. Hearing this, the mercenaries all hesitated for a moment before accepting this outcome. The 10 pulled the monster cores within their space belt one by one. After watching their leader fight with Jian Chen, they understood that he only wanted their monster cores. Not killing them was already a huge favor granted to them, and if they didn't hand over the monster cores, with Jian Chen's strength, their entire mercenary group would be slaughtered. If their own leader, who was the strongest of them all, couldn't even withstand 5 moves from Jian Chen, then they had no chance. The scarred mercenary took out a bag from within his space belt and began to place all of the monster cores he had in that bag. Then without any command from Jianchen, he immediately began to take the other mercenaries' monster cores and collected them into the bag. In the end, he presented the bag to Jianchen with a lingering gaze and said, "In that bag are all the monster cores we have." This bag of monster cores had around 100 inside. Around half of them were Class 3 monster cores and the rest were Class 2 monster cores with barely any Class 1 monster cores. Jianchen took the bag into his own hands into his space belt and said, "Jianchen, abide by my promises. You are free to go." Without any further words, the scarred mercenary led the other mercenaries away from the area. Seeing the group disappear into the horizon, Jianchen let out a breath of air. Leaning carelessly against a tree next to him, he muttered, "These past few days have been so repetitive. However, despite it being so tiring, I've earned quite a lot. The amount of monster cores I've earned should be enough to last my cultivation needs for a very long time. I don't even know if I should thank the Tianxiong clan or hate them." After taking a small break, Jianchen stood back up and said, "Right now there's practically no one left in the Magical Beast Mountain range. With such a huge area to search, I'm far too lazy to look in each zone. Forget it, I've already got enough monster cores. I'll let the rest go and cultivate my strength in the meantime. Otherwise, if I were to come across multiple great Saint Masters at once, I doubt I'll be an opponent for them." Chapter 159, A Breakthrough in Strength. Afterward, Jianchen found a river based on his memories, and washed away all the filth on his body. He then took out and then put on a new set of clothes from his space belt. He had been wearing crude clothes put together from animal skins for quite a long time, so when he put on soft, cloth clothing, a comfortable feeling instantly spread throughout his body. Jianchen seemed to revel in the warm feeling the cloth gave off as he smoothed it over his body. In that instant, his mental state that had been so tightly wound the past few days finally relaxed. After that, Jianchen killed a magical beast in the forest and tore off a large and fatty hind leg. He then found a dry spot on the ground to build a fire and began to slowly roast the meat. After filling his empty stomach, Jianchen began to count the profits from the past few days. When Jianchen took out all of the monster cores in his space belt and placed them on the ground, they formed a pile that was around 1 meter high. Such a large amount of monster cores gathered together began to glow, as the hidden surges of power within each of them began to resonate with each other. Seeing this, Jianchen's heart began to race. Roughly calculating, Jianchen concluded that this pile had at least 2,000 monster cores. As for the exact number, it would be impossible to guess an accurate value without carefully flipping through them. After all, the power of a monster core was not related to any other factors. Looking at the plentiful monster cores, Jianchen couldn't help but smile in excitement. The rewards from the past few days were really abundant, to the point where it was hard to believe. Such a large amount of monster cores was enough for Jianchen to cultivate for quite a while. With an excited mood, Jianchen took out the 3 space belts and threw them to the side. These few space belts had all been specifically taken from those mercenaries in preparation for this future occasion. Soon after, Jianchen began to separate the monster cores from each other. After 4 hours, Jianchen had finally organized the large mass of various monsters' cores. There were now 3 piles in front of him, 1 each for Class 1, Class 2, and Class 3. There are a total of around 700 Class 1 monster cores, 900 Class 2 monster cores, and 600 Class 3 monster cores. I hadn't imagined that I'd gain about 2,300 monster cores these past few days. This is really much better than I anticipated. It seems I must really thank the Tianxiong clan. I must thank them for the great opportunity they gave me. Jianchen laughed to himself when he saw all of the monster cores. Jianchen then placed each group of monster cores into a different space belt. He then returned to the cave that he had been living in for a while. After covering up the entrance, he resumed cultivating. The cave was so dark that he couldn't even see his own hand. Jianchen sat there cross-legged, like an unmoving sculpture. If it weren't for the faint sound of him breathing, people might have really mistaken him for a living statue. As Jianchen continued to absorb the energy from within the monster cores, the saint force within him was constantly growing stronger. After becoming a Saint Master, the demand required for cultivation not only increased, but Jian Chen's absorption speed had also doubled. Before becoming a great saint, he needed to consume 3 Class 3 monster cores in a single night, which meant that he consumed almost 10 Class 3 monster cores for a day of cultivating without stopping. Now that his absorption speed was faster, the amount of monster cores that Jian Chen would need to absorb in a night was 6 to 7. Based on this, he'd end up consuming around 20 Class 3 monster cores in a day. Although the amount of Class 3 monster cores he had to consume was a frightening number, Jian Chen wasn't concerned at all about a lack of monster cores. Not only did he have hundreds of Class 3 monster cores in his space belt, he was also in the Magical Beast Mountain range. He could enter the deeper regions and kill Class 4 magical beasts anytime he wanted to. Class 4 monster cores contained enormous amounts of energy, and far surpassed that of Class 3 monster cores. In the outside world, Jian Chen's name, as well as everything he had done in the Magical Beast Mountain range, was currently being spread everywhere. As this was happening, Jian Chen was sitting cross-legged within the dark cave, diligently raising his strength. Time quickly passed. In the blink of an eye, a year had already passed. Within this year, the commotion that Jian Chen had caused in the outside world had gradually settled. Wake City had long since recovered to its original ways. There wasn't that big of a difference between now and a year ago. The only difference was that the Wake City's Tianxiong clan had died out. Deep within the Magical Beast Mountain range, there were no signs of people. Class 4 magical beasts roamed about the area as they pleased, and it wasn't an area that anyone could just walk around. In this area, one could go for half a month without seeing any trace of a human. This was an extremely common occurrence. This moment, a green-black mist was slowly rising nearby. The scent of roasted meat was blown through the air by the breeze, gradually diffusing it in all directions. The figure of a cotton-wearing youth could be seen sitting cross-legged with a bonfire right in front of him that burned brightly as a piece of magical beast meat was cooked over the flames. This youth looked no older than 20 years old, with his long hair tied together into a ponytail with a piece of grass. This youth was exceedingly handsome, with flawless facial features along with a delicate yet roguelike look. On his calm face was a face full of charm that could practically kill any woman in the world. This youth was Jian Chen. In this 1 year, Jian Chen hadn't left the Magical Beast Mountain range at all. After 1 year of using the monster cores from the mercenaries, there were practically no more Class 3 monster cores left. Only the Class 1 and 2 monster cores remained. In that 1 year, all of the Class 3 monster cores were completely exhausted, and so Jian Chen could only use the Class 4 monster cores. Soon enough, even the Class 4 monster cores were used up, causing Jian Chen to go to the depths of the mountain range to hunt and kill Class 4 magical beasts before continuing to cultivate. Time and time again, Jian Chen had continued to cultivate using the monster cores for 1 whole year. Jian Chen had long since left the primary Saint Master level and reached the peak Saint Master level. His strength had reached a point where even killing a Class 4 magical beast was of no problem at all. 1 year has passed. How quickly time goes by. It seems that I should head out and stroll around now and stabilize my strength. After using the monster cores to cultivate, only a tiny residual of chaotic nature from the monster core's energy was left. Jian Chen muttered to himself in front of the campfire. After eating his fill, Jian Chen extinguished the fire before heading out from the depths of the Magical Beast Mountain range. He had already planned on leaving the mountain range long ago, so he had prepared a few Class 4 monster cores to cultivate with later. The Class 4 magical beasts rarely roamed around the heart of the Magical Beast Mountain range, so it was generally more peaceful than the outside layers, since Class 4 magical beasts were also not as common as Class 1 or 2 magical beasts. In this case, coming across a Class 4 magical beast was not an easy task, and finding a Class 3 magical beast would be even easier. Ho! Just as Jian Chen walked out of the forest carefully, suddenly, a large sound exploded out from behind him. Staring in the direction in which his ear was vibrating, Jian Chen noticed that the ground he was standing on was beginning to tremble slightly as well. Chapter 160, Appearance of a Class 5 Magical Beast. Jian Chen instantly grew serious as he heard the abrupt heaven-shaking roar. Looking in the direction of the yell, He thought to himself, for a simple roar to have such an intense effect, this must be a peak class 4 magical beast. Just as Jian Shen had this thought, a terrifyingly strong wave of energy made its way over to him. This wave of energy was so strong that it could be seen by the naked eye as it spread throughout the air and caused havoc. Many of the ancient tall trees were slowly drawn toward the source of energy as it overwhelmed anything in the sky. Jian Shen grew even more solemn as he felt this extreme change in atmosphere. He was originally shocked by the wave of energy coming at him, but now he was stunned and couldn't help but say, with this power, it might as well be a class 5 magical beast. The spread of the wave of energy was exceedingly fast. In a split second it had reached where Jian Shen stood, but in that moment, the energy had begun to wane in power before becoming nothing more than a strong whistle through his ears as it passed. Jian Shen's clothes were blown slightly along with his long black hair which began to drift in the wind. The angry roar of the magical beast continued to be heard throughout the area with an explosive sound. The wave of energy simultaneously continued to wreak havoc on the ground by shaking it. Jian Shen's face grew serious as he heard two different roars. His eyes revealed a small amount of surprise as he muttered, "It seems that there's two class 5 magical beasts fighting each other." Jian Shen then immediately ran in the direction of the roars. Following the aftermath of the damage from the energy wave, Jian Shen quickly traveled toward where the fight was taking place. 500 meters ahead of Jian Shen were two class 5 magical beasts fighting intensely against each other. Each and every time they clashed, a strong wave of energy surged out in all directions. Even the ground had started to be filled with holes as the two magical beasts fought each other, the craters being a few meters deep. Nearby trees were uprooted and thrown about, and some were even sent flying far into the sky, with the tall grass becoming nothing more than a fine powder. Hiding 500 meters away to avoid being spotted by the two class 5 magical beasts, Jian Shen stood in a bush and watched the beasts fight with an attentive eye. Although the two magical beasts were moving at rapid speeds, Jian Shen could clearly see the minute details of their fight. Between the two magical beasts fighting, one had a color as dark as the night and a body the same size of a cow. However, on the back of its shoulders was a pair of equally dark wings. On the other side was a tiny but snowy white dog-like magical beast. Although the two magical beasts were completely different sizes, the intensity in which they were fighting at was the same. Ho! Ho! The angry snarls continuously flowed from their mouths like a bullet of energy that rippled through the air. As soon as the roars left the magical beasts' mouths, the air shook with the vibrations and caused every other sound in the area to be drowned out. This is truly the strength of a class 5 magical beast, Jian Shen remarked as he observed the two magical beasts battle. His entire body stood firmly in place despite the ground shaking beneath him. He was, however, afraid of gaining the attention of the two magical beasts and inviting unwanted trouble. Despite Jian Shen's current strength of a peak Saint Master and being unafraid of any peak class 4 magical beast, Jian Shen was not completely confident that he could run away from the two class 5 magical beasts after this display of strength. Although a class 5 magical beast only had a single level difference with a class 4 magical beast, in between this gap was like the gap separating the heavens and the earth. The two magical beasts continued to fight for over half the day before their snarls finally began to weaken. By this point in time, the two had scars and wounds all over their bodies and were barely capable of standing up. Their bellies were moving up and down as they tried to breathe in a frantic manner. Seeing such a miserable scene, Jian Shen couldn't help but think to himself, judging by this, both sides are already at a disadvantageous stalemate. They don't even have the energy to stand and are completely exhausted. Jian Shen suddenly felt a surge of confidence. Even the blood within him seemed to boil in anticipation as his heart began to palpitate. Jian Shen lay on the ground with a small look of hesitation adorning his face. Debating furiously with himself, he finally came to a conclusion. Biting his lip, he stood up onto the ground and quickly made it over to where the magical beasts were. Ho! The two magical beasts finally realized that Jian Shen was rapidly approaching, and so they let out one more angry roar. Their eyes flashed dangerously at Jian Shen, but other than that, they couldn't do anything else. Just as he got within 100 meters of the two, Jian Shen suddenly stopped as his face grew unnaturally serious. Even though the magical beasts in front of him were injured, that didn't make Jianchen any less cautious. Slowly walking forward, Jianchen advanced one step at a time towards the two Class 5 magical beasts. At the same time, the light wind sword appeared within his hand with a hazy glow surrounding the blade as if swallowing it. Ho! Class 5 magical beasts all had a good amount of intelligence. They had long since realized what Jianchen was trying to do. With another threatening roar at Jianchen, they warned him to not get any closer. Jianchen paid no heed to the angry roars of the magical beasts and carefully approached closer and closer to them. At the same time, Jianchen had wanted to charge at the magical beasts to kill them, but for the sake of his own health, he had to be more cautious. After all, these were Class 5 magical beasts, not Class 4 magical beasts. Chapter 161, Battling the Class 5 magical beasts. Seeing how Jianchen continued to get closer, the two tired Class 5 magical beasts grew even more frantic. If they were at their peak conditions, then they naturally wouldn't put a peak Saint Master within their notice, but at this moment they were at anything but their peak condition. After such a furious battle, the two were clearly very injured and could do nothing. Even their inner energy had been completely used up. In such a state, a Saint Master, or even a great saint would be able to come up to them and kill them. The two magical beasts struggled for a moment, seemingly trying to stand. However, despite their efforts, they weren't able to even accomplish this extremely simple task. With this pitiful display, the heart that was struggling to leap out of Jianchen's throat finally began to calm down a little. However, he still continued to maintain a great amount of vigilance just in case something else happened. Continuing to walk closer and closer to the magical beasts, Jianchen had quickly gotten within 30 meters of the two. Now that he was even closer, the amount of vigilance Jianchen had increased greatly. Ho! At this moment, the snowy white-colored dog-like magical beast began to snarl once more. A large amount of energy gathered within its mouth before compressing to form a sphere of energy as the magical beast warned Jianchen with its eyes. The other cow-like magical beast stared firmly at Jianchen as the wings on its back began to shake with a fierce amount of energy emanating from it. Jianchen's forward advancement began to falter as he sized up the two injured magical beasts with a critical eye. Seeing how the two were gathering energy, it felt as if they were ready to take action if he got any closer. Jianchen had started to hesitate. Despite seeing how injured these two magical beasts were, they were still emitting a strong amount of pressure at him. Just faintly, Jianchen could detect an extremely dangerous amount of qi radiating from the two Class 5 magical beasts. The two magical beasts and Jianchen stared nervously at each other for a moment before Jianchen's body suddenly swayed a moment and disappeared into a blur. He had quickly charged toward the snowy white dog-like magical beast with a large amount of Saint Force bursting out from within as he pushed his speed to its limits. The short 30 meters dividing him and the magical beasts had quickly become non-existent as Jianchen flew over in a split second. Just as Jianchen approached the dog-like magical beast, his right arm shook in a smooth movement as the light wind sword stabbed straight down at its belly with a sharp amount of sword qi enforcing the blow. Ho! The Class 5 magical beast wasn't slower than Jianchen, and the moment he had reached it, the sphere of energy gathered within the magical beast's mouth was spat out at tremendous speeds toward Jianchen's chest. At that moment, Jianchen took back his sword and immediately dodged to the side with a tremendous amount of effort, causing the sphere of energy to fly towards the side of him. It was a shame that this sphere of energy was traveling far too fast. Despite Jianchen's effort to dodge the sphere, he wasn't able to completely avoid taking damage. Originally the sphere had tried to slam against Jianchen's chest, but since Jianchen had moved his body, it had struck firmly against his left shoulder. Bang! The sphere of energy was only the size of a small fist, but the amount of energy it contained was terrifying. As a result of the sphere smashing against Jianchen's left shoulder, his entire body was sent flying backward. After flying 10 meters into the air, Jianchen crashed down onto the ground and rolled away painfully before slowly reaching a painful stop. His face began to shake and started to drain of blood as a fierce amount of pain could be felt coming from his left shoulder. Jianchen's clothes around his shoulder had been completely shredded because of that sphere of energy. At the same time, the entire top part of his body was in agony as his left shoulder had become mutilated to the point where the bones could be seen and blood continued to flow from his wound freely. Jianchen tried to resist the intense amount of pain from his left shoulder as even moving it had tormented him. Standing up painfully, Jianchen's eyes swung toward that dog-like magical beast. After that magical beast had attacked, the expression it had wilted as its eyes dimmed in luster. It appeared that the attack it used had used up the last of its energy, so in its current condition, it was even more tired than before. Despite the attack having caused a serious amount of damage to Jianchen, it had not impacted his movements all that much. With a small blur, Jianchen had already moved toward the magical beast once more with the light wind sword out and ready to strike with its sword chi. Kang! Just as the light wind sword lashed out, a white-colored blur slammed firmly against the blade of the light wind sword and caused it to divert from its original trajectory and stab into nothing but air. Immediately, Jianchen looked at the blur, but he wasn't able to figure out what exactly had blocked his sword before feeling another source of pain on his chest. Dang dang dang, the fierce amount of attacks on Jianchen caused him to stumble a few steps back as he felt a scorching pain on his chest. Tilting his head down, he saw that his chest had turned a very deep red and blood had started to leak from it. Forcibly swallowing the blood in his throat, Jianchen looked at the Class 5 magical beast on the ground only to see the long tail of it swaying feebly behind it. It was this tail that had just attacked Jianchen. I didn't think I'd come across such a strong resistance against these Class 5 magical beasts, but today I will definitely take your monster core. Jianchen bit his lip before letting his light wind sword separate itself from his hand and fly toward the magical beast. Against such a swift sword chi, the Class 5 magical beast was powerless to dodge and could only try and endure the incoming strike. The sword chi accurately shot through one of the wounds of the magical beast, causing the entire body of the beast to tremble. There was no hesitation in Jianchen's movements. Moving forward with his light wind sword, his weapon struck the beast in the throat. PCH. This time the dog-like magical beast had already used up all of its energy to the point where even its tail wasn't able to be moved. The light wind sword met no obstruction as it stabbed deeply into the magical beast's throat. Then, the sword slid straight through the neck and then into the ground beneath it. Chapter 162, Smooth Killing. Seeing the Class 5 magical beast finally take damage, Jianchen let out a breath in relief. The strength of a Class 5 magical beast was indeed strong to where even a peak Class 4 magical beast was nothing more than an annoying ant to them. Against a heavily injured magical beast that couldn't even muster up the energy to stand, even Jianchen had somehow sustained a grievous amount of damage. Just as Jianchen let out a breath of air, an intense amount of energy suddenly came toward him. Jianchen's face grew shocked as he immediately looked up only to see a meter-long crescent-shaped blade of wind come at him from the other magical beast's wings. This crescent-shaped blade of wind carried so much energy that it caused Jianchen to become even more serious. Jianchen's expression became grim as he rolled to the side without any further hesitation to dodge the blade of wind. The crescent-shaped wind flew by Jianchen's hair, causing a few strands to fly away after being cut. The crescent continued on at an extremely fast speed that destroyed anything in its path without mercy. Finally it flew 100 meters into the ground, exploded with tremendous force, causing dirt and dust to be kicked up into the air. With his body violently moving in such a way that his left shoulder had smashed into the ground several times after rolling, the pain he felt surged through his body intensely and caused his nerves to be tormented. The skin continued to spasm as he grit his teeth in pain and tried to resist the sensations. Right now there was only one Class 5 magical beast left who was glaring angrily because Jianchen had managed to only get away with an injury. Then, the cow-like magical beast with black fur began to gather up energy once more as the wings on its back began to emanate a sort of black glow. The amount of energy floating around the area quickly went from weak to strong. The energy near the wings was even stronger. However, the glint in the magical beast's eye grew even dimmer, and before long, it wasn't even able to muster up the energy to keep its eyes completely open anymore. Sensing the strong amount of energy come from the wings of the Class 5 magical beast, Jianchen couldn't help but retreat a few steps backward with a heavy face in preparation to dodge the incoming attack. Ho! The magical beast roared with an extremely loud voice as if it was warning Jianchen once more to not advance. He could see in the magical beast's eyes that it was in a completely weakened state. Yet the energy condensed on its wings was ready to fire like a drawn bow. This was the last opportunity for the magical beast to live. The energy within this attack was all that was left of the magical beast's supply. If this attack missed, the magical beast would be nothing more than a lamb to the slaughter. Jian Chen's legs took a few steps backward as he stared intensely at the magical beast with even more vigilance than ever. At this moment, the light wind sword abruptly flew from Jian Chen's hand high into the air toward the magical beast and then over it before turning around to strike at it from behind. Just as Jian Chen was about to make his move, the wings on the magical beast began to tremble as a huge crescent-shaped blade of wind blew toward Jian Chen. Jian Chen had already anticipated such a move, and when the magical beast shot out the crescent-shaped gust of wind, he rolled on the ground once more. Carefully making sure that his left shoulder wouldn't drag across the ground, he dodged the attack. Soon after it attacked with its wings, the magical beast looked as if it had lost every bit of energy it had. The bright colors in its eyes lost its luster and adopted a weary look. At the same time, the light wind sword in the air began to tremble as it fell down with a tremendous amount of sword chi radiating from the entirety of its blade. Soon enough, the entire sword was wrapped within a light glow. Bathed within the white glow, the light wind sword's blade couldn't be seen from the outside, making it seem very mysterious. Immediately following the sound of the sound barrier being broken, the light wind sword flew toward the back of the magical beast with a tremendous speed. Kacha! The loud sound of a collision could be heard as the extremely sharp point of the light wind sword broke through the skull of the magical beast and inserted itself deeply into its brain. Ho! The magical beast let out a miserable scream that rang through the air and even shook the eardrums of Jian Chen with its vibrations. The vibrations began to weaken after some time before disappearing completely along with the remaining light in the magical beast's pupils. Quickly, the eyelids of the magical beast closed off its eyes to the world. With some effort, Jian Chen crawled up from the ground unsteadily with a pale face as he looked at the light wind sword that was impaled in the magical beast's skull. He couldn't help but have a victorious smile adorn his face at this fortunate sight. It finally died. The strength of a Class 5 magical beast is indeed strong. I didn't think 2 heavily injured Class 5 magical beasts would require so much effort to kill. It seems that the last encounter with the Golden Fur Tiger King wasn't the full extent of its strength. Jian Chen murmured weakly. Afterward, Jian Chen walked toward the cow-like magical beast and pulled out his sword from the head. Sitting down, he began to gather the radiant saint force within the world essence and condense it within his body. He wasn't in any serious rush to deal with the corpses of these 2 magical beasts. In the first place, his body wasn't in any condition to work with the carcasses. There was also the fact that there may be other magical beasts in the vicinity, so Jian Chen's first priority would be to quickly hurry up and heal himself. Since Jian Chen had broken through to become a peak saint master, his spirit had also increased as well. He could now control the radiant saint force for not only a longer amount of time, but also a larger quantity of it as well. This time, the wound on Jian Chen's shoulder was very serious. The intense energy that struck his shoulder had even fried some parts of his wound, so even with the radiant saint force, the wound would take some time to heal. After 4 hours, the milky white glow that surrounded Jian Chen gradually dissipated, revealing Jian Chen's body inside. His face was somewhat pale despite looking better than the condition he was in before. After using the radiant saint force to heal such a wound for 4 hours, he was rather exhausted, but at the very least, he wasn't feeling extremely drowsy like he used to feel. Using the radiant saint force for 4 hours had a very mysterious effect. The wound on his shoulder had already fully healed without even a single blemish showing on his skin. Chapter 163. Leaving the magical beast mountain range, Jian Chen slowly opened his eyes from his cross-legged meditation position. Turning his head to look at the wound that used to be there on his left shoulder, he raised a hand to gingerly touch the new skin over it. Feeling the skin without noticing any strange peculiarity with it, Jian Chen could only sigh in admiration of the effects of the radiant saint force. Jian Chen tore off his damaged clothing to reveal his blood-splattered body underneath. Then, using the pieces of clothing he had ripped off, he began to wipe away the blood. Slowly standing up, Jian Chen's eyes looked at the corpses of the two Class 5 magical beasts on the ground with a profound look. Based on the appearances, this snowy white magical beast must be the Quick Cloud Beast. The book said that the body of a Quick Cloud Beast was small, but was unnaturally nimble with fur that resembled the clouds above in the sky. And this other magical beast with wings on its back, this must be the magical Skywing Cow. The wings on its back can only be used to attack, and cannot be used to fly with. In a flash, Jian Chen had remembered the information he had seen back in Kargath Library to identify the corpses in front of him. The magical Skywing Cow's monster core is hidden underneath the wings, I'm sure, and the Quick Cloud Beast has it in its skull. The light wind sword appeared in Jian Chen's hands before it quickly stabbed into the body of the Quick Cloud Beast and dug around in its head. After some effort, the monster core of the Quick Cloud Beast was extracted, causing the dog-like magical beast, in the end, to resemble something grotesque. This Quick Cloud Beast was a Class 5 magical beast, but because of their species type and limited potential, their body was never able to grow past 2 meters unless they reached the Class 6 level. Because of this, even the monster core within their body was only the size of a walnut. After extracting the Quick Cloud Beast's monster core, Jian Chen moved onto the magical Skywing Cow and used his light wind sword to stab into the area below the wings for the monster core. Then with a great amount of effort, he finally extracted the monster core from its body. In contrast to the other monster core, this one was half the size of a fist. Jian Chen dried off the blood from both monster cores using the ripped-off pieces of his shirt before revealing 2 sparkling pieces of crystal-like items. Feeling the amount of energy hidden away within the monster cores, Jian Chen couldn't help but feel a little fearful inside. It was no wonder there was such a difference between a Class 5 and a Class 4 magical beast. Just looking at the monster cores, anyone could clearly tell the difference. In comparison to a Class 4 monster core, a Class 5 monster core had an extreme qualitative leap that would be incredibly difficult to try to make a comparison with. Also, despite the 2 monster cores coming from different magical beasts, the amount of energy contained inside was hardly any different. With just these 2 Class 5 monster cores alone, I suspect that they will last me a very long time as I cultivate with them. Grasping both Class 5 monster cores in his hand, Jian Chen couldn't help but feel happy. In his heart, this was nothing but good fortune. The happy mood continued for another small moment before becoming tranquil once more. Taking out his space belt, he placed both Class 5 monster cores and the corpses inside. The carcasses of a Class 5 monster core was very valuable, so Jian Chen couldn't abandon them like he did the Class 3 or Class 4 magical beasts. With these 2 carcasses alone, Jian Chen could sell them for a high price, since any corpse of a Class 5 magical beast or higher was usually an object that had no standard price in any city. The reason was because the blood and meat of a magical beast of such a high class was good for the body when consumed. The high-quality meat of a magical beast could even increase one's strength or alter the body in a certain way. The bigger of the 2 magical beasts here was the magical Skywing Cow, which was around 4 meters big. Meanwhile, the Quick Cloud Beast was only a meter wide, so Jian Chen could just barely fit them both into his space belt. After storing away the 2 magical beasts into his space belt, Jian Chen took out another set of clean clothes and put it on. Although he hadn't left the magical beast mountain range in a long time, the amount of clothes he had taken from the other mercenaries wasn't lacking. After taking care of everything, Jian Chen immediately left the area. Although the fight between 2 Class 5 magical beasts had scared away all of the surrounding Class 4 magical beasts, he wasn't completely sure there were not other Class 5 magical beasts that might have wandered close by. If one more Class 5 magical beast came, Jian Chen wouldn't be able to fight against it at all. Even with his peak Saint Master strength, he didn't even have any confidence that he could run away from a Class 5 magical beast. Unless he were to come across a species that was particularly slow. Otherwise he wouldn't have a chance to escape. In a flash, another half-month had gone by. In the depths of the magical beast mountain range, Jian Chen stabbed through the heart of a cyan-colored python and extracted its monster core. Then, he grabbed a handful of the grass below to wipe off the blood on it. This half-month I've only collected 10 Class 4 monster cores. For the sake of my cultivation, should keep some just in case. For now, instead of trying to increase my strength, I should try to resolve any issues within my body. Otherwise, the berserk elements within the monster cores may cause some sort of issue. In any case, I should leave this area and take a look at the situation on the outside. Jianshan cleaned off the rest of the blood on the fist-sized Class 4 monster core as he finished talking. Besides, I'm still carrying the final wishes of Kendall. I must find his family quickly. Leaving the magical beast mountain range, he traveled for another 2 days after passing through the forests and killing countless numbers of magical beasts and wild beasts before finally coming to a large grassland. Jianshan didn't return to Wake City because Tianxiong Lai of the Tianxiong clan possessed an Earth attribute Saint Force. With that Earth Saint Force, he held the superior defensive advantage over Jian Chen's nimble sword play. Not only that, but Tianxiong Lai's strength was also at the peak Great Saint Master, so until that man was dead, Jianshan wouldn't want to carelessly walk back there. Also, with the Tianxiong clan being one of the hegemons in Wake City, they surely must have many personal connections despite their heavy losses in the magical beast mountain range. The moment Jianshan came back, he may or may not come across another Great Saint Master, or even be encircled by multiple Great Saint Masters. Chapter 164, Group of Prairie Wolves. At this moment, there was a flash in Jianshan's eyes before he suddenly stopped. Right in front of him, Jianshan could detect the movements of something going through the grass. There was a cold glint in Jianshan's eyes as he surveyed the patch of grass in front of him. His ears twitched as he continued to listen for the smallest sounds of movement in his surroundings. A look of disdain adorned Jianshan's face as he flew in the direction that the noise of the movements was coming from. Within a few breaths, the sounds of movement could be heard even louder than before, to the point of being able to hear them even without paying attention. Plus, the shaking within the grass could be clearly seen now, almost as if the wind was blowing in a specific area. Suddenly, a countless number of shadows flew out from behind the tall grass. Jianshan was very calm as he walked forward. In his right hand the light wind sword condensed into existence as he grabbed it. How? At this moment, the sound of a wolf could be heard as a blue-colored figure leaped out from the grass toward Jianshan. Without even a sideways glance, Jianshan shook his right arm slightly as the blue figure flew close by him. The light wind sword in his right hand became a streak of silver light as he walked past the flying creature. Just as the blue-colored figure leaped out at him, it abruptly fell to the ground. Looking down, all Jianshan could see was a blue-colored wolf with a stream of blood leaking from its throat. Just as this wolf fell to the ground, a barrage of wolves flew out from the tall grass at Jianshan. One of them opened its large jaw wide, causing the irony scent of blood to waft out and attack the nose to an unbearable degree. Still with a calm expression, Jianshan continued to stab out with his sword at lightning-quick speed as he struck each incoming wolf fatally in the throat. These blue wolves were only at the class 1 to 2 level, so Jianshan didn't feel threatened by them at all. From behind the cover of the tall grass, blue wolves continued to leap out as they charged at Jianshan. However, Jianshan's forward pace didn't falter even a single step as he brandished his weapon in a web of sword strokes. Each and every second his sword would swing out around him, and with each swing, another wolf was struck fatally. The amount of blue wolves hidden in the grass numbered within the thousands as they formed a circle around Jianshan that was around 100 meters in circumference. Now that Jianshan was firmly sealed in, the blue wolves could stalk quietly behind the tall grass, yet while Jianshan could easily kill a blue wolf, there was only 20 of them dead by his hands. Although he realized just how many blue wolves were around him, Jianshan still didn't seem to take it seriously. Against a group of Class 1 or Class 2 magical beasts, Jianshan could easily kill each of them in one strike without wasting any energy at all. Even if a group of mercenaries were to come across this pack of blue wolves, they would definitely have a headache after dealing with them, even if they had a great Saint Master with them. A Class 2 magical beast would have an extremely difficult time hurting a great Saint Master, but when there was 1,000 of them, they wouldn't just stand around and let you kill them, they would all come in for the kill. Within the prairie, these blue wolves were a very common sight, but after killing countless blue wolves, the light wind sword in Jianshan's hands was almost like the scythe of the god of death, mercilessly reaping the lives of the magical beasts. Without exception, each and every wolf that leaped at Jianshan had its throat stabbed mid-roar. Even in midair, they were unable to escape the rapidness that was Jian Chen's scythe-like sword. Behind Jian Chen, the massive amount of blood had already turned into a single line that splattered on top of the tall grass. As for the blue wolves' bodies, they were all neatly piled up on top of each other in a single line. Despite this indiscriminate slaughter by Jian Chen, the wolves leapt out from the tall grass one by one in an endless stream, almost as if they weren't afraid of injuries or death. In the eyes of any spectator, it was almost like Jian Chen was a hated enemy that they were ready to die for in order to kill. The blood of the blue wolves continued to splatter into the air as the light wind sword covered the sky with its blade, and after being mixed with blood, the shine of the sword was unmistakably distinguishable. Jian Chen's body didn't have any unnatural movements. From the start of this massacre to now, he had calmly continued on in a single line without the blue wolves being able to attack him from the front or back. Yet, they were also unable to stop his forward momentum. This massacre continued for another hour, and not too long after, Jian Chen had already killed several hundred blue wolves without a single speck of blood landing on his body. Aoo! At this moment, the fierce snarl of a wolf came from behind. It was a command for the wolves that immediately called each wolf in the front of the circle to retreat behind, leaving behind several hundred corpses without a single trace of their retreat. The pack of wolves had come quickly, but they had also left quickly. In the blink of an eye, not a single trace could be seen of the blue wolves, except for the blood of the hundreds of dead that left a single path on the ground. Seeing how the wolves had retreated, Jian Chen took back his light wind sword. Despite this extensive close-ranged combat, Jian Chen's face wasn't red, and neither was he breathing hard. The rumors said that the magical beasts in the prairie were unnaturally vicious. It would seem that this rumor is true. Each wolf came at me with no regards for its life or any fear either. Jian Chen thought to himself. Even after that ordeal, Jian Chen's direction didn't change as he continued to walk down a single line. With all the corpses behind him, he didn't pay any attention to them since they were only Class 1 and Class 2 magical beasts. Despite the amount of bodies, a person of Jian Chen's strength didn't care for it since it wasn't worth the time spent harvesting and storing away the bodies. This was certainly not a task Jian Chen had wanted to waste time doing. The area of this grassland was expansive, so Jian Chen could walk for 2 days before he would finally reach the end of the area, which turned into a desolate piece of land. After walking for another 4 hours, he finally made his way to an official road where he could see the leftover marks of a carriage that had driven by. On the road, a small group of caravans were slowly advancing in the direction of Jian Chen. Chapter 165, Mysterious Person. Looking at the group, Jian Chen could clearly distinguish their figures despite being thousands of meters away. That was because the group only had 10 caravans and personnel numbering around 40 men. Each one of them was sitting on a tall horse with a rather luxurious-looking caravan in the middle of the group. With Jian Chen's regular walking pace, he had quickly met up with the group of caravans. Each one of the mercenaries sitting on top of the horses stared sharply at Jian Chen. After a few of them looked over Jian Chen's figure, they each looked away from him as if they didn't care for him. Just as Jian Chen was about 5 meters away from the caravan group, the two sides suddenly stopped since Jian Chen's path was blocking their group from continuing forward. At this, the mercenaries that had glanced at Jian Chen from before no longer looked friendly. A few of them had already started to have a small amount of killing intent in their eyes. "Who are you, and why do you block our path?" An older man bellowed at Jian Chen. Not caring for the other man's temper, Jian Chen waved his hand and said, "Fellow travelers, this one has found himself lost, so this one wonders if some questions could be asked for a moment." Hearing this, many of the mercenaries furrowed their eyebrows. For mercenaries that traveled the continent, if they weren't familiar with the terrain, then many would bring a map with them. People like Jian Chen were not commonly seen, so the words spoken by Jian Chen couldn't be taken so easily. "Less of your fucking bull, hurry up and scram, otherwise don't blame this uncle for being impolite." One of the more violent mercenaries snarled out. This elder man stalked forward with his muscles rippling in a way that exploded into everyone's view while also seeing the short pants he was wearing. Jian Chen's face tilted down slightly as he looked coldly at the mercenary who spoke. "You better clean your mouth, or else you may find that all it'll take to lose your life would be one phrase." Hearing this mercenary's words, they had clearly annoyed Jian Chen. The words of Jian Chen said caused the color of the other mercenaries to drop a few shades. The one that had been looking at Jian Chen couldn't help but feel his heart tremble as if a sudden chill had descended over the area. At first the man had felt a bit cowardly, but the moment he had realized the one who was threatening him was only 20 years old, the cowardice within him turned to anger before a slightly low voice could be heard from behind him. "Fellow friend, the words you say are too much." From this voice, everyone turned to see a middle-aged man riding a black horse slowly approach them. The look on his face was a bit gloomy, but there was an icy tint to his eyes as he looked down at Jian Chen. "Captain Lan. Captain Lan." The moment this man emerged with his black horse, all of the surrounding mercenaries began to call out his name. Jian Chen looked at the man and said, "Before saying something like that, you should first discipline your subordinates." The big mercenary snorted and glared dangerously at Jian Chen. "How arrogant, you're nothing more than a boy who hasn't been taught by his mommy. To dare disrespect our captain, why don't I bring your mother here to help discipline you?" Leaping from his horse, he began to walk toward Jian Chen with his fist outstretched. Hearing this talk about his mother, Jian Chen's face suddenly changed as a tremendous spike of killing intent flowed from his eyes. Lifting up his left hand, he blocked the incoming slap from the older man and then immediately planted his right hand into his stomach. Kacha! Immediately the sound of bones could be heard breaking as Jian Chen's Saint Force-enhanced fist struck against the man's stomach. Straight away, a dent could be seen in his chest. Ah! With a miserable howl, the man's face was completely filled with a violent expression as his tanned face grew pale. Straight after, Jian Chen's figure disappeared in a blur as his leg planted itself against the man's chest once more with a biting cold gust of wind. The mercenary was sent flying high into the air before finally landing 10 meters away on the ground with a resounding bang. Dust was knocked up into the air as blood came spurting out of the man's mouth. His face, which was already very pale, had started to wither a bit. Seeing how that older mercenary was struggling to crawl up from the ground, the other mercenaries looked on in disbelief. With a stunned look as their only reaction, they slowly started to shout and pull out their saint weapons to charge at Jian Chen. "Stay your hand!" The one named Captain Lan suddenly called out from his black horse. In an instant he had instantly stopped every single mercenary from charging at Jian Chen. Captain Lan urged his horse forward as he looked at Jian Chen with a serious face. "Honored one, do you truly just wish for directions without any other motive?" "Correct." Jian Chen nodded his head. "Captain Lan, give this junior here a map." Just as Jian Chen finished talking, an elderly voice came from behind. While the voice was very elderly sounding, the air became rather imposing. Hearing that elderly voice, Jian Chen turned his head to look behind to see a small group of luxurious caravans make their way toward him. An expression of respect grew on Captain Lan's face as he cupped his hands in the direction of the caravans. "Yes, elder." Seeing the display Captain Lan was showing, Jian Chen's eyes flickered slightly. Looking at the caravans, he could tell that there were indeed people in the caravans, but because of the distance, he wasn't able to gauge their exact strength. Then, Captain Lan took out a rolled-up piece of parchment from his space belt and threw it at Jian Chen. "This is the map of the Blue Wind Kingdom, take it." Jian Chen unraveled the parchment and took a brief glance on it before rolling it back together. Cupping his hands, he left the area without any further words. Watching Jian Chen's body grow even more distant, Captain Lan cried out, "Forward!" After picking up the mercenary that had been struck down by Jian Chen and placing him on a horse, the group began to continue on with their path. Jian Chen continued to watch the caravan fade away from the side for a while. He knew that the man leading the caravans was a peak great saint master, so to have such a man have a respectful tone, Jian Chen was truly curious about the man inside the caravans. The only thing he could sense within the caravans was merely the breathing of a person. Other than that, there was nothing. "Ha, youngster, for a youth to possess a strength like yours, that is not an easy task. Continue to work hard. I believe that not too far in the future, you will surely shake the continent." When Jian Chen had passed the caravans, he could faintly hear the elderly voice whisper into his ears almost as if the elder were standing right next to him. Jian Chen's face had changed slightly as he suddenly went rigid. Immediately looking around himself, he didn't see anyone around him. So he stared in disbelief at the caravan that had just passed by. He had just heard this elder's voice from inside the caravan. Even with the incredulous look on Jian Chen's face, the mercenaries that were guarding the caravans appeared to not have noticed the sound. Their faces had no difference than before Jian Chen had heard the sound. "Youngster, if you can one day make it to the Holy Empire, then you can find me using this badge." At that moment, the elderly voice came back once more without the same mysterious tone. At the same time as the voice, a purple shining badge flew out from the window and into the hands of Jian Chen. The few mercenaries guarding the caravan suddenly turned to look at Jian Chen with a look of extreme envy and at the object in his hand with some doubt. Seeing this purple metal that was shining in his hand, Jian Chen's heart began to feel as if waves were constantly crashing over him. It was at that moment that he had realized the mysterious figure sitting in this caravan was undoubtedly an unmeasurably deep expert. He hadn't expected to receive this metal, but he knew that this metal was definitely not something normal people could get. There was a strange feeling within Jian Chen's heart. For a person to be so strong in the caravan, why was it that the strongest person in his group was only a peak great saint master? The average strength in this group was only a great saint, with some that weren't even at that level. Also, to have so many goods being transported in the open like this, could it be this person didn't even have a space belt or space ring? Kiki, as the caravans traveled further away, the clear sounds of a cough could be heard. Jian Chen looked at the caravan with his eyes, but his heart was not as tranquil as it usually was. "Who?" Jian Chen let out a long breath of air as he looked at the purple metal in his hands. This metal was only the size of his hand and was a finger wide and heavy to the touch. This metal was made entirely from purple coins, so there must have been a special way to refine and create this object. And since it was made from purple coins, the price of this item would be unnaturally high. The Holy City in the Holy Empire, that is one of the capital cities in the Tianyuan continent. It's also where the ruler of the Holy Empire resides. Just what identity does this mysterious man have? Jian Chen muttered. Chapter 166, Phoenix City. After meeting the mysterious person within the caravan, Jian Chen had some doubts. Judging from how that Captain Lan had so respectfully called out to the elder in the caravan and that Jian Chen couldn't measure the elder's strength at all, the elder was definitely not a great saint master. Against great saint masters, Jian Chen could easily discern their cultivation levels, but when it came to this elder in particular, Jian Chen had no idea. It would appear that his strength is at the very least an earth saint master. But for what reason did he give me this badge? Jian Chen looked back to the purple coin-casted metal in his hand. This metal didn't have any words on it, but there were various patterns running through it. Forget it, there isn't any use to trying to figure this out. I'd best be on the road. Until I have enough strength, it would be best for me to wait until I go to the Holy City. Jian Chen decided before storing the metal into his space ring and continuing on his way. The road was unusually peaceful. There were many times where he wouldn't see anyone. Yet sometimes during the day, many caravans and mercenaries would ride by on their magical beasts. Now that he had a map, Jian Chen was no longer worried about getting lost. In accordance to the map, Jian Chen had walked for 3 days and in the end, he finally reached Phoenix City. Phoenix City was a Class 2 city encompassing an area of several hundred kilometers. By the time he reached the outskirts, there was already a steady flow of people bustling around. A group of leather-wearing mercenaries rode on magical beasts of many sizes while other caravans slowly carried their goods on the road. All sorts of topics were being made as voices blended together. Jian Chen followed the road for the final stretch of land and slowly made his way past the city walls. Walking besides Jian Chen were other mercenaries that also traveled by themselves. So Jian Chen hadn't attracted any attention to himself. By the city gates of Phoenix City, there were many guards standing perfectly straight as they watched with a cold gaze those who entered the city. "Stand still, what are you doing?" At that moment, a cold voice cried out. Turning their heads to look, everyone could see a caravan group being stopped by a single city guard. Simultaneously, a short but plump man with embroidered clothing walked forward pretending to pull the guard's hand in a friendly manner as if he was a friend. Pleasantly stuffing a few gold coins into the cold hand of the guard, the man began to smile as he spoke a few words into his ear. The guard pinched the gold coins given to him by the man before rubbing them together with a serious face before it slowly melted away. Waving his hand with a happier expression, he cried out, "You may enter." Practically every merchant that was blocked by the guards would end up having to pay a small fee to enter. This was an extremely common practice on the Tianyuan continent, but there were a few merchants that had refused to pay this toll. Of course, the guards would use the pretense of feigning that there were dangerous goods within their caravans and would not allow them to enter before forcing a search on them. This rudeness had made many people unsatisfied, but because these guards were still the garrison soldiers of the city, many people were unable to do anything about them. In the face of these guards, even some of the more violent mercenaries would only be able to suck up their anger. Jian Shen had however been able to enter Phoenix City without paying the tax. To the guards, Jian Shen was a lone traveler that wasn't escorting any sort of goods, so they didn't care about him. It was only for the merchants that they would obstruct a person's way. As a Class 2 city, Phoenix City was relatively huge, being bigger than Wake City by a large degree. As soon as Jian Shen had entered the city, he walked to the closest stable and bought himself a nice-looking horse to ride to the center of the city. Because of the wideness of the city, if one didn't have a horse to travel on, it would take over half the day to walk from the east to west gate of Phoenix City. After traveling on his horse for some time, he finally stopped at a bank. Tying up his horse, he entered the bank. Inside the bank, Jian Shen converted all of the copper, silver, and gold coins on him into purple coins. Only a few of the coins were left unconverted for him to use for daily expenses. Most of the money he had converted came from his time in the Magical Beast Mountain Range, where Jian Shen had taken all of the money from the dead mercenaries' bodies and space belts. Just before Jian Shen was about to put all of the coins back into his space belt, he had counted how many purple coins he had. Unexpectedly, there were around 30,000 purple coins, and added with the purple coins he already had on him, then he had a total of over 40,000 purple coins. Before he had left the bank, he had collected a purple card from the bank. This card was called the purple card by everyone on the Tianyuan continent. Purple cards were used by the entirety of the Tianyuan continent for those who wanted to save space from carrying so many purple coins. A purple card was like a space belt in that it had its own interdimensional space to hold coins, but it was used to measure the amount of purple coins. With a purple card, one would be able to freely visit any bank to access their money. Many higher institutes would even take the purple card as payment, so it was a lot more convenient than carrying around individual stacks of purple coins. The purple card was only half the size of Jian Shen's hand and was created through a special means of refinement. Although the card itself looked rather weak, it was actually very strong. Even Earth Saint Masters wouldn't be able to inflict damage to this card. Obtaining a purple card wasn't all that hard, but still not so easy that ordinary people could receive one. To obtain one, a person must have at least 10,000 purple coins. With a purple card, not only was it a symbol of one's identity, but also of one's wealth. For purple coins to be added into the purple card, it required the bank's special instrument, so ordinary men would have absolutely no way of tricking the system. However, the banks would only recognize the card and not the owner. Even if one were not the original owner, the purple card would still be usable by any bank in the Tianyuan continent. Walking out of the bank, Jian Shen held the purple card in his hand. It contained all 40,000 of his purple coins with barely any other coins left for him to use for his own personal interests. When the people in the bank had seen the purple card in Jian Shen's hands, they all looked at him with an envious expression, with many people already looking at him with other ideas. Jian Shen looked around himself at the people looking back at him and smiled. Placing the purple card in his space belt, Jian Shen mounted his horse and rode off. Chapter 167, Auction Affairs. Next, after asking around, Jian Shen arrived at a store that specialized in monster cores but was rather large. The building made of a blue stone material and had 3 stories. Although there were many mercenaries that sold monster cores, they were mainly low-leveled ones. The higher-leveled monster cores were less common to see, so if one really wanted to buy one, they would need to go to a store. The bigger the store, the higher quality the monster cores were. Plus, stores that sold monster cores had a huge supply in comparison to the mercenaries that only had 3 or 5 class 1 or 2 monster cores for sale. If some influential clans wanted to buy large quantities of monster cores, they would go to these stores to buy them. Entering the monster core shop, Jianchen felt that despite being such a large store, there weren't many people inside. There weren't even any monster cores arranged out, with only a few female clerks that were working, but other than that, this place didn't seem like a monster core shop at all. With some confusion, Jianchen walked toward them and asked, "Might I ask if this is where they sell monster cores?" Hearing this, the female clerk looked at Jianchen's handsome and delicate face with an astonished face. Seeing such a handsome face like Jianchen's had made her stop for a second before speaking up joyously. "Did you see the sign outside our store? If our Monster Core Heaven store didn't sell monster cores, then what place would this be?" Jianchen let out an embarrassed smile as he looked at the empty halls. "Then why is there not even a single monster core out on display?" Perhaps it was because of Jianchen's appearance that made him irresistible to women, but the clerk then stared blankly at him before explaining pleasantly, "Our Monster Core Heaven store only displays our higher-level monster cores out on the 2nd and 3rd floor. The 1st floor only has Class 1 monster cores, but since those are extremely common, there is no need to put them out on display." Hearing this, Jianchen suddenly saw the light. This was only the first story of the store, but he hadn't realized that this was how the store functioned. The female clerk continued to say, "Which monster core did you want to buy? If you want to buy Class 1 monster cores, then just tell me how many you want to buy. But if you want to buy Class 2 monster cores, you'll have to head to the 2nd floor." Jianchen hesitated for a moment before asking, "I'm not here to buy monster cores, but might I ask if you are buying monster cores instead?" The female clerk looked at Jianchen with an astonished face. "What? You're selling monster cores?" "Correct." Jianchen nodded. An incredulous look filled the clerk's eye as she stared at Jianchen. She didn't know why such a handsome youth was trying to sell instead of buy monster cores. She had worked at this store for many years, but this was the very first time such a person came. Usually, it was always a group of burly men. She didn't look at Jianchen with disdain despite this. Instead, she continued to speak with a sweet smile. "We also buy monster cores here, so if you please bring out the monster cores you want to sell." Jianchen immediately took out 2 space belts and handed it over the female clerk. In these 2 space belts were Class 1 and 2 monster cores. The clerk took the 2 space belts and began to inspect the amount of monster cores inside. Quickly, a look of shock appeared on her face because the amount of Class 1 and 2 monster cores in the space belts numbered to around 2,000. This was the first time she had ever seen so many monster cores. Taking in a deep breath, the female clerk looked at Jianchen's handsome face with a complex expression. "Please wait one moment, I will be right back with the shopkeeper." Handing the space belts back to Jianchen, she turned around and headed toward the 2nd floor. Not too long after she had left, a man wearing an embroidered blue robe came down with the same female worker. "Shopkeeper Bai, this is the one that wants to sell monster cores," the female clerk said as she brought the shopkeeper to Jianchen. The one named Shopkeeper Bai nodded his middle-aged head as he smiled at Jianchen. "Junior, would it be possible for you to bring out the monster cores for me to see?" Jianchen didn't hesitate in bringing out the space belts for Shopkeeper Bai to see. Extending his hand to inspect the contents of the space belt, Shopkeeper Bai's eyes suddenly widened in shock as well when he discovered the amount of monster cores within the space belts. To sell so many monster cores at once, this is something Phoenix City doesn't see often. The middle-aged man spoke as he studied Jianchen. "Junior, do you mind if I call you that?" "I hope you don't mind." Jianchen smiled. "Shopkeeper, why don't we talk about how much money you'd like to buy this for?" "That we can do, please allow me to think it over for a moment." The man laughed. Without any more talk, he led Jianchen into a secret room so they could go over the monster cores. Once the monster cores were all counted for, the middle-aged man had given Jianchen a total of 5,000 purple coins. Taking the purple coins, Jianchen thanked the shopkeeper and walked out of the building. Riding his horse to a crowded marketplace, he began to buy several sets of clothing and other essential items for surviving in the outside world. Just then, the loud clamoring of the crowd caught Jianchen's attention. I've heard that the annual auction will be taking place in 10 days' time. This time there'll be many precious treasures. Yeah, this auction is a must this year. Who knows what treasures will be seen there? Phoenix City's Heavenly Phoenix auction is very famous. The annual auction usually always has many people from other cities participating, so it'll definitely be crowded. An auction. Jianchen cried out to himself as he listened to the others talk. Now thinking about this, he no longer was in any desire to stroll around the area and immediately went back onto the road to return to the center of Phoenix City to find the place everyone was talking about. The building was exceptionally tall. Despite being only 2 stories tall, it had already reached several dozen meters higher into the air than a 4-story inn nearby. Even the area it had covered was large as compared to the Mercenary Union, which was roughly the same size. On top of the great big gates to the auction house was a 3-meter-tall board that had the 4 words, Heavenly Phoenix Auction House, written in fancy calligraphy. There were many people coming in and out of the auction house as well. With a little hesitation, Jianchen disembarked from his horse to enter the inn nearby the auction house to rent a room. After that he let the horse go. After a few days, Jianchen strolled around before finding an isolated area, where he took out some herbs from his space belt. After the time it took to boil a cup of tea, Jianchen stood back up with a completely different look. This time he looked more like a dark-skinned middle-aged man with relatively ordinary looks. If he were to blend into a crowd, no one would be able to remember his face other than the fact that there was a little scar on the left side of his face. After disguising himself, Jianchen swapped out his clothes and then headed toward the Heavenly Phoenix auction house and then inside of it. After entering, he saw a steady stream of people walking in and out around him. By this time, the annual auction was about to start, so many people were already trying to register their own precious items for the auction. "Sir, might I ask what item did you want to register?" Just as Jianchen had entered the auction house, a female worker had called out to him sweetly. "Could you please bring out the official for this place? I have a few things to discuss with him." A deep voice came from Jianchen's throat. He had even changed what he sounded like. "Yes, please wait for a moment." The female worker studied Jianchen before excusing herself from the area to walk further into the auction house. In a flash, a white-haired man wearing rich-looking clothes walked toward Jianchen with the female worker right behind with a respectful face. "Elder Huang, this is the person looking for you." The female spoke up before turning to Jianchen. "Sir, this is our Heavenly Phoenix auction house, high-leveled appraiser, Elder Huang." Jianchen cupped his hands together as a greeting. His greeting was completely ignored by the elder, who instead looked at him and asked, "What business might you have?" Jianchen's eyes swept around himself to look at the nearby people in the auction house before replying, "Elder Huang, I have a few precious things that I would like to sell. Would Elder like to talk about them?" Hearing the words of Jianchen, the elder's eyes flashed before gesturing Jianchen toward a secured room to talk. Jianchen and the elder sat down on the opposite sides of a table. Although the room wasn't all that big, the soundproofing was very good in here, so their negotiation could be done freely without the worry of anyone from the outside listening in. "Sir, you should have brought the item you wanted to auction off to Elder Xiu." When the two sat down, the elder couldn't help but say that. "Huh, Elder Huang, I wanted to auction something, but it must remain confidential." Jianchen laughed before taking his space belt out. "Then you can rest easily. Our Heavenly Phoenix auction house is well respected among all cities and will not divulge even the smallest bit of information to anyone." The elder smiled before inspecting the space belt given to him. The moment the elder looked inside the space belt, his eyes suddenly froze along with his face as he looked at the contents with shock and disbelief. This is the body of a Class 5 magical beast. Chapter 168. Yullian. Seeing the shocked expression on the elder's face, Jianchen smiled gently and said, "Indeed, Elder Huang has a good eye." The unexpected sight of a Class 5 magical beast's body had given the elder's heart a great big shock. But soon enough, he quickly brought his emotions under control. Taking a deep breath to calm himself, he looked back at Jianchen with a completely different attitude. "Dear sir, do you really wish to auction off this Class 5 magical beast body?" The elder's eyes contained hope in them as he waited for Jianchen's response. A Class 5 magical beast's body was especially precious as well as being especially hard to supply. In the history of the Class 2 Phoenix City, there were only 2 or 3 occurrences of a Class 5 magical beast body being sold in the last dozen years. Although, each time it occurred, it had sent shockwaves to the nearby cities where all of the influential clans in the vicinity would begin to fight over it. If these 2 bodies were to be auctioned off in his Heavenly Phoenix auction house, his auction house would definitely earn a supremely high reputation. If that happened, then their auction house becoming the #1 auction house in this area of the empire would not be too far off as a dream. Seeing the nervous look on the elder's face, Jianchen couldn't help but smile. Correct, these 2 Class 5 magical beasts, I've come here to auction them. Will there be a problem with that? The elder's face lit up as he hurriedly responded to Jianchen. No, not at all. You may auction these bodies within our Heavenly Phoenix auction house. In fact, we would be honored to do so. However, dear sir, these 2 Class 5 magical beast bodies are very important and have far surpassed my authorization. Please wait a moment, and I will bring the manager of the Heavenly Phoenix auction house to come and discuss this matter with you. With that, the elder gave a polite salute to Jianchen and left the room, causing it to become quiet once more, leaving Jianchen as the sole person inside. Casually leaning back on his chair, Jianchen tilted his head down as he began to think. Right now his mind was constantly thinking about just what type of trouble he could come across as a result of this. The body of a Class 5 magical beast was very precious. Within the Class 2 Phoenix City, this could be said to be extremely rare. Jianchen himself knew that if he were to auction these 2 bodies, it would undoubtedly send shockwaves throughout this area. Thus trouble would undoubtedly come to him. Gotcha! Suddenly a sound could be heard as the door to the room was opened. Jianchen tilted his head to look only to see a cyan-colored robe-wearing woman slowly walk in with refined steps. The moment she had walked in, a sweet fragrance had immediately wafted into the room. This woman was rather tall and looked to be around 30 years old. Her entire figure seemed to carry the unique temperament of a female with a beautiful face that held no argument. To some ordinary men, they would most likely not be able to resist her charm. Right behind her, her dark green-colored hair hung without any binding against her shoulders and back. Her black pupils seemed to shine with a mysterious light that seemed as if it could read a person's mind. Right behind this woman was the elder Huang, who had previously left the room, closing the door behind them. As Jianchen studied the woman studied Jianchen as she elegantly sat down opposite of Jianchen. Her twin black eyes stared deeply at Jianchen as if trying to understand him before she smiled and said, I am called Yullian, the one in charge of the Heavenly Phoenix auction house. Might this one know what to call you by? Jianchen cupped his hands in greeting. This one is called Wu Yun, Miss Yullian. Yullian nodded her head and gave a small look at the nearby elder Huang. So you are called Wu Yun. I've just heard from Elder Huang that you wanted to sell 2 bodies of Class 5 magical beasts. Is this the case? Yullian's beautiful eyes then swung toward Jianchen to study his face for an answer. Correct, that is the case. Jianchen placed the space belt with the 2 Class 5 magical beasts on top of the table. Continuing to speak, he said, Miss Yullian, they are right here, so examine them if you will. Yullian grabbed the space belt to begin inspecting the contents, but the moment she saw the corpses of the magical beasts inside, her face had a look of extreme shock. These are indeed Class 5 magical beasts. And if I'm not wrong, then this is the magical Skywing Cow and the Quick Cloud Beast. Yullian commented. Jianchen nodded his head. Miss Yullian, if I leave these 2 Class 5 magical beasts within the care of the auction house, will there be any problems? Hearing that, Yullian began to laugh gently as she placed the space belt back on the table. Her twin black pupils looked as if they could absorb the soul of any mortal and had some sort of lovely charm to it as she stared at Jianchen. Of course there won't be a problem. For Sir to auction these 2 magical beasts within our auction house, this is simply too rare of an event. This would surely be a good thing for our auction house, so I can exempt Sir from the service fee for this. In the case that the auction house successfully sells the magical beasts, then Sir will receive 100% of the profits, and our auction house will not receive any of it. Jianchen didn't care at all for the service fee, but he cupped his hands in respect nonetheless. Of course, if Sir were to bring out the Class 5 monster cores with the magical beasts, then our Heavenly Phoenix auction house can openly proclaim this and definitely bring in a higher price. Why don't you think this over for a moment? Yullian continued to say. Jian Chen's face had a bitter smile as he said, Miss Yullian, I am truly regretful, but those 2 Class 5 magical beasts were found by me on the Magical Beast Mountain Range. By the time I discovered their bodies, their monster cores were already gone, so thus I only have the bodies and not the cores. Oh. So that's the case? Yullian didn't believe Jian Chen, but nevertheless smiled at him. Seeing this, Jian Chen's expression sunk as he spoke with a slightly unsatisfied face. Miss Yullian, I've already said it, but it's up to you to believe it. Seeing the slightly angry look on Jian Chen's face, Yullian had an apologetic look on her face and said, Sir Wu Yun, please do not take offense. This little girl was only asking, without any other purpose, please do not misunderstand. Quickly taking out a piece of paper, she said, Sir Wu Yun, please sign your name here and give us the 2 Class 5 magical beasts so that the Heavenly Phoenix auction house can auction them. Does Sir have any further questions? I am already familiar with the rules of the auction house. Good. Then these 2 magical beasts will be temporarily given to you. If there are any problems that arise from this, then your auction house will take the blame. Sir Wu Yun, please rest assured. Our Heavenly Phoenix auction house must maintain our reputation. In the case a problem or loss happens, our Heavenly Phoenix auction house will take responsibility. Chapter 169, Eliminating Danger. After that, Jian Chen and the manager of the Heavenly Phoenix auction house, Yullian, went over a few things for the process of the auction house. After all that was done, Jian Chen left the Class 5 magical beasts with the auction house and left. Once Jian Chen had left the secret room, all that remained was the appraiser Elder Huang and the manager Yullian. Closing the door to the room, Elder Huang returned to where he was just sitting and sat down once again. Staring at the space belt in Yullian's hands, he finally said to her, Little Yullian, do you think the Class 5 monster cores could be in Wu Yun's hands? Yullian carefully caressed the space belt with the 2 Class 5 magical beasts with her jade-like fingers. Despite there being blood within it, she did not feel unwell or even loathe it even with her feminine personality. There's a good chance of that. Judging from these wounds, the magical beasts must have killed each other and had one person clean up at the end and extract the monster cores. So this person must not be all that strong and is vastly inferior to these 2 Class 5 magical beasts, otherwise he would have easily killed these 2 magical beasts without having so many messy wounds. Yullian murmured. Yet, we cannot rule out the fact that he did not extract the Class 5 monster cores. The one called Wu Yun indeed came across the corpses, but the probability that he doesn't have the monster cores is low. Only those at the Earth or Heaven Saint Master level would not care for a Class 5 magical beast's body, but the monster cores were clearly not removed by such an expert. Hearing this, Elder Huang nodded his head and said, When you say it like that, then the 2 Class 5 monster cores are really on Wu Yun's body. Yes, that is the most likely situation. Yullian nodded her head slowly. Forget it, whether or not the Class 5 monster cores are with Wu Yun are not of our concern. We just need to do what we are supposed to do as an auction house. Although a Class 5 monster core is very expensive, compared to our Heavenly Phoenix auction house's reputation, it is a negligible cost. Alright, Elder Huang, let's forget about the Class 5 monster core and do what is expected of us with peace of mind. To our Heavenly Phoenix auction house, this accidental discovery of the Class 5 magical beasts was an extremely rare occasion in the first place. That's why we must properly utilize this hard-to-come-by opportunity and increase our Heavenly Phoenix auction house's renown even more. Yes, I understand. Elder Huang responded. Furthermore, we must keep this matter with Wu Yun being the owner of the Class 5 magical beast a secret. We must not allow any news of this to be leaked out, otherwise, it would not benefit our Heavenly Phoenix auction house at all. It would also have a huge impact on the reputation of our Heavenly Phoenix auction house. You can understand this much, right? Yullian spoke gently, but the words she spoke contained a hint of iron to them, almost as if she was speaking like a commander. "Yes, this elder understands." Elder Huang answered immediately. After leaving the Heavenly Phoenix auction house, Jianchen walked into the crowded streets down a certain road. In the end he had finally reached a small isolated alleyway. Seeing the rows of locked-up homes that were uninhabited, Jianchen hesitated for a moment before taking out his light wind sword to cut down the chains and walking inside a room. The inside of the room was pitch black, so visibility was very poor. Yet Jianchen could make out the simple layout of the furniture and a table that had a very visible layer of dust on top of it, indicating that no one had lived in this home for a very long time. Jianchen looked around himself before immediately taking out a few things from his space belt to clear away the disguise on his face. Swapping out his old clothes for a new set of clothes and then changing his hairstyle, he destroyed any last trace and walked out of the wooden house into the alley. By the time Jianchen had come into the line of sight of anyone else, he already had his original appearance. Even his attitude had made a change from his previous disguise. At this moment, even if Elder Huang or Yullian were to look at Jianchen, they would not be able to find a connection between Jianchen and Wuyun because the differences between the two were far too many. First, buying a detailed map of Phoenix City, Jianchen had decided to walk toward the bustling Heavenly Phoenix auction house and stroll around. While Class 5 magical beasts may be a common sight in the more major cities, in a city like Phoenix City, this was an undeniable precious treasure. Jianchen knew that selling a Class 5 magical beast would not be as easy as it should be, so he had to familiarize himself with the environment. In the case that something unexpected happened, he would at least have an escape route and wouldn't be flustered. For the entire afternoon, Jianchen wandered around the area and traveled down every road and alleyway. It was only when it was night time that Jianchen returned to the inn. After eating a simple meal, Jianchen sat down on his bed in a cross-legged position and closed his eyes. But Jianchen wasn't cultivating this time. Perhaps it was because he had gone up in strength far too fast, or maybe it was because he had used the monster cores to cultivate too much. With his strength being at the peak Saint Master level, he was no longer able to use his strength as efficiently as he used to. With this, he wasn't able to utilize his fighting strength to his full potential or even as smoothly before. It wasn't an extremely serious problem, but then, Jianchen knew that if he didn't resolve this problem soon, then it would definitely have a long-lasting effect on him. So in this moment, Jianchen was not cultivating in fear of increasing his strength too fast. If he abused his cultivation speed, his control over his Saint Force would be too troublesome. So, before any defects formed in his cultivation, it would be best to resolve any dangers before such a thing could happen. Chapter 170, The Sensation Caused by the Class 5 Magical Beast, 1. For the entire night Jianchen sat on his bed, and refined the Saint Force within his body endlessly, to ensure that he would be able to use it efficiently. He didn't dare to continue cultivating, in fear that the danger hidden in his body would become more predominant. The Saint Force within Jianchen's body flowed around his meridians in a fixed pattern non-stop. As it flowed within his body, he could feel the control over his body constantly increasing. At the same time, the level of compatibility between his Saint Force and his body slowly increased. He also realized that while circulating his Saint Force, his blood was also doing the same. A few of the strange genetic factors in his blood began to accumulate and enter the various organs of his body. Those genetic factors were the anti-venom genes from the silver-striped golden snake. Although the anti-venom genes had fully integrated into his bloodstream earlier in the year, the blood was only starting to alter his organs. It would take a long time until the process was completed. Right now, the amount of anti-venom-filled blood had only changed a small part of his body. Previously, the 1000 immunity had only succeeded in a small amount by having his blood reproduce the anti-venom. It would only be when his entire body was altered, and had the anti-venom that the 1000 immunity would truly be completed. The night went by peacefully until morning came. When the sun rose, the Saint Force that Jianchen had been circulating the whole night gathered continuously back into his dantian, finally forming the shape of a sword. Although the shape was still a bit blurry, it was still more distinct than it had been when Jianchen broke through to the Saint Master level. Jian left his room and went down to the tavern where he ordered a single dish of magical beast meat for breakfast. With his current strength, even if he went a day without eating, he wouldn't feel hungry at all. Although, having 3 square meals a day had already become a habit to Jian, and he would always eat regularly unless there were some extraordinary circumstances. Other than that, he refused to not eat a meal. After all, eating a fine meal was one of life's simple but great pleasures. Since it was prime time to eat breakfast, the tavern had quickly filled up its tables. Many of the mercenaries were forming groups to sit together. They exchanged information of what they've heard and seen, filling the room with their clamor. Jian sat by himself with a few other dishes on the table and enjoyed his meal while listening in on the other mercenaries. Hey fellow brothers. Today the Heavenly Phoenix auction house will start. Rumors say they will be auctioning off a Class 5 magical beast corpse. A blue-robed mercenary said. What? A Class 5 magical beast? Oh heavens, that's a beast that requires an Earth Saint Master to defeat at the very least. How does the Heavenly Phoenix auction house have one of those? Fellow, are you sure you're not tricking me? A person cried out in disbelief. The first one who spoke had a smile full of conviction. Fellow brothers, why don't we make a bet on it then? If the words I say are fake then I will be the loser, but if my words end up to be true, then I win. How about it? Do you expect me to believe a Class 5 magical beast could possibly show up in a Class 2 city like Phoenix City? Fine. I'll call your bet. Another person called out. I've lived for 30 years and heard news of Class 5 magical beasts many times, yet I have never seen a Class 5 magical beast with my own eyes. Okay, I'll bet as well. 2 gold coins. In the case that the Heavenly Phoenix auction house really is selling a Class 5 magical beast, then consider it my loss of these 2 gold coins. A person at the table called out. The amount of chatter at the table was growing as it quickly attracted the attention of the nearby diners. Immediately a few other men walked on over to the table and greeted them respectfully. Fellow brothers, you've just said that the Heavenly Auction House is auctioning off a Class 5 magical beast. Is this piece of information verified? Hearing this, the youth that first mentioned the news laughed. Brother, it seems no one believes this information. Then why doesn't everyone bet on it? Is this not interesting enough for you? The person who had approached them hesitated before nodding. Fine, then I shall bet 5 gold coins. If there really is a Class 5 magical beast being sold at the Heavenly Phoenix auction house, then these 5 gold coins are yours without any hard feelings. Okay, I'll also place a bet. I've been here in Phoenix City for 20 years already, but I've never seen a Class 5 magical beast appear in an auction. Actually, I've never even seen one before, so I don't even know what one would look like. Class 5 magical beasts normally appear in king cities. They rarely even show up in Class 1 cities. The information about a Class 5 magical beast showing up in a Class 2 city like Phoenix City is most likely false. Forget it, since everyone is so into it, I might as well bet. This news is definitely false. I'll add a bet as well. I say that the Class 5 magical beast could appear in some Class 1 city auction. That would at least be possible. However, appearing in a Class 2 city is clearly impossible. The discussion at the table quickly attracted the interest of everyone eating in the restaurant. They had all been lured by the topic of a Class 5 magical beast, and were all silently gambling with themselves about whether or not it was true. Jian, who was slowly enjoying his food, smiled bitterly and shook his head at the actions of the people in the restaurant. At the moment, he was currently wondering whether bringing the 2 Class 5 magical beasts to a Class 2 city like Phoenix City to auction them off was a wise choice. However, Jian understood very well that if he brought the Class 5 magical beast to a Class 1 city or the capital to auction off, he'd admittedly sell it for a high price. The problem was that the pressure he'd have to face would unfortunately be greater since the stronger experts were pretty much all gathered at these flourishing and fertile places. If someone from that type of place came looking to stir up trouble with him, he'd have a much harder time dealing with them. However, being in a second-class city like Phoenix City was a completely different story. In Phoenix City, Earth Saint Masters were extremely uncommon. Even if an Earth Saint Master class expert did approach him looking for trouble, it was likely that Jian Chen would be able to cope. It was unlikely that the opposite party would be able to pressure him to the point where he wouldn't be able to resist. It was precisely due to this reason that Jian Chen had decided to auction off the Class 5 magical beasts at Phoenix City. Just as the people in the restaurant were discussing the news about the Class 5 magical beast in a frenzy, the loud banging of a gong suddenly rang out from outside. Dong! Dong! Major news, major news. The annual large-scale auction at the Heavenly Phoenix Auction House after the 9th will be selling off 2 Class 5 magical beasts. This information made both the people on the street, as well as the originally incomparably lively restaurant dumbstruck. Everything went dead silent and everyone had expressions of disbelief on their faces. Class 5 magical beasts were really going to be sold in the Heavenly Phoenix Auction House. Moreover, there wouldn't be just one available, but 2. Chapter 171, The Sensation Caused by the Class 5 Magical Beast. 2. The difference between a Class 4 and Class 5 magical beast was only one level, but there was a huge distinction between the two. Class 4 magical beasts weren't anything special on the Tianyuan continent, but a Class 5 magical beast was very precious. This was because a Class 5 magical beast was a great deal stronger than a Class 4 magical beast, which made them that much harder to capture or kill. Class 5 magical beasts were gifted with a certain level of intelligence. The 5th stage magical beasts were born with an advantage, in that their strength would be greater than their human counterparts of the same level. Thus, under a situation of a one-on-one, it would be very difficult for a human expert to kill a Class 5 magical beast. In addition to that, Class 5 magical beasts had an established hidden rule: if they fought and killed among themselves, other Class 5 magical beasts wouldn't interfere. However, once a human expert disturbed them, they would call upon each other, and unify together to retaliate against the threat. That was why the body of a Class 5 magical beast was so rare. Jian Chen felt that the beating of the gong outside on the streets was unexpected. Although he knew that the Heavenly Phoenix Auction House would announce the Class 5 magical beasts, he didn't think that they would announce it in such a manner. The sounds of the gong being beaten and firecrackers going off filled the streets. The declaration of the annual Heavenly Phoenix Auction House was officialized. With this declaration outside, in less than half a day, the entire Phoenix City would know about the Class 5 magical beasts being sold at the auction. A Class 5 magical beast being sold in a Class 2 city was a rare event that shocked many people. Something like this was an unprecedented event for the Heavenly Phoenix Auction House, and it could be said that they were sparing no expenses. Not only did the entire Phoenix City know about the Class 5 magical beast, but even the cities that were in the vicinity of Phoenix City knew. Sometime later, the news that the Heavenly Phoenix Auction House would be auctioning a Class 5 magical beast had spread to 500 kilometers away. Soon enough, every influential power had heard about the Class 5 magical beasts and set off for Phoenix City. At the center of Phoenix City, there was a quiet mansion that towered over the others. By the gates of the mansion, 10 armored guards stood perfectly still like statues. On top of the gates was a board with the 3 words, City Lord's Mansion. Those golden words gave anyone reading it a feeling of power. This mansion was truly the mansion of the Lord of Phoenix City. Within the beautiful garden behind the mansion, a white-robed, middle-aged man was practicing his martial arts with a giant blade. His movements were quick and fluid as he moved around the flower garden. His blade danced around and left shadow trails as each swing filled the air. With how fast the blade was traveling, it was almost impossible to catch the blade's exact position as a large amount of Saint force filled the air as well. A moment later, an elderly housekeeper walked forward and watched the man in the rose garden practice his martial arts. "My lord, some news just came in. There will be 2 Class 5 magical beasts auctioned off at the annual Heavenly Phoenix Auction House." "What? A Class 5 magical beast?" The blade in the middle-aged man's hand suddenly stopped as he turned around to look at the housekeeper with a stunned expression. "Housekeeper Cheng, what did you just say?" The housekeeper repeated his words, causing the middle-aged man's face to grow more and more shocked. With an expression full of disbelief, he asked with some doubt, "Housekeeper Cheng, the Heavenly Phoenix Auction House is truly selling a Class 5 magical beast?" My lord, that was the news given by the Heavenly Phoenix auction house themselves. Elder Shou himself confirmed it as well, so this was absolutely true. For the past dozen years, I've only seen Class 5 magical beast in Phoenix City thrice. So hearing that a Class 5 magical beast is being sold in the auction is a first in many years. The middle-aged man furrowed his eyebrows in thought before asking, Housekeeper Cheng, do you know who was responsible for these two Class 5 magical beasts? To have such precious cargo come into our Phoenix City is quite strange. Elder Shou does not know. This answer was already anticipated by the middle-aged man, and his face revealed no surprise. Tilting his head for a moment, he said, Housekeeper Cheng, go to the Heavenly Phoenix auction house and invite boss Zhou Tian to the mansion. Yes, my lord. In the residence of another place in Phoenix City, an elderly man with a scholarly air sat in his study reading a few books. At that moment, a knock was heard from the door. The man furrowed his eyebrows and said with some dissatisfaction, Who is it? Did I not say that I am not to be disturbed while in the study? Father, it is your son with a report. Come in then. The door opened, revealing a black-robed, middle-aged man who strolled in. Father, some news just came in. A Class 5 magical beast will be auctioned off later at the Heavenly Phoenix auction house. What? A Class 5 magical beast? The elderly man was shocked. Immediately putting down the book in his hand, he turned away from his table to look at his son, Jian Er. Is that true? Your son personally went to the Heavenly Phoenix auction house to confirm it. This is undeniably true. The middle-aged man nodded his head with certainty. A Class 5 magical beast is extremely uncommon in a Class 2 city. The Heavenly Phoenix auction house, just where and how did they get a Class 5 magical beast? The elder murmured. There was a flash in his eyes as he looked at the middle-aged man, Jian Er. Do you know if the Heavenly Phoenix auction house is selling the Class 5 monster core, a Class 5 magical beast cub, or the body of a Class 5 magical beast? Your son does not know. The Heavenly Phoenix auction house would not divulge that information. Only a few figures know that answer, and your son was unable to find out. Find it out immediately. The elder said. Yes. The news of the Class 5 magical beast had not only interested the people in Phoenix City, but the influential people of power in the area as well. For the next few days, a countless stream of people came into Phoenix City from every direction. Even more waiters and workers for the inns and restaurants hurried around as the buildings filled up completely. Along with the amount of guests, the prices of the inns rapidly soared to 10 times the usual price. At the same time, the security of the city was intensified as groups of soldiers could be seen patrolling around every area. Every so often, Jian Chen would observe the situation by the sidelines. The other few moments were spent cultivating. He was still hard at work trying to refine his Saint Force completely. Despite the price of the room going up by 10 times the original price, it was not an issue for Jian Chen. Chapter 172, the start of the auction. By this point, Phoenix City was a city full of the rich and the poor mixed together because of the news of the Class 5 beast. It had not only attracted the influential people from the city, but the outside powers as well. At the same time, the area around the Heavenly Phoenix auction house had become strange. Almost every day, various dressed-up people would linger around the auction house, and there would always be a pair of eyes closely watching people enter and exit the auction house. Although the Heavenly Phoenix auction house had tried to keep the matter of what exactly was being sold a secret, it was like trying to contain a fire with paper. After every influential power had looked into the matter, most of the details about the two Class 5 magical beasts and their origins had been found out by the day before the auction. There were two Class 5 magical beasts' bodies without their monster cores and a mysterious man that had to be an Earth Saint Master at the very least. This was all the information that every influential power could find out. Although this was something outside of their expectations, it didn't weaken their excitement over the Class 5 magical beasts. In a restaurant in Phoenix City, a few middle-aged men sat gathered together in a somewhat cramped room. Keep looking. I order everyone to look into this. We must find out who is responsible for these two Class 5 magical beasts. The Class 5 monster cores are definitely with him. Tomorrow when the auction starts, that man will definitely show up, so have someone look at anyone that enters the auction house closely. A white-robed, middle-aged man commanded. In a luxurious manner in Phoenix City, a dignified person looked down over the other middle-aged men and elders sitting at the table. Right now, the news of the Class 5 magical beast has already been confirmed. Although they're only the bodies without the monster cores, their prices will still be very high. It is said that eating the meat of a Class 5 magical beast is said to increase one's strength majorly. Even the blood of a Class 5 magical beast can strengthen the inner organs. Something like that could even benefit an Earth Saint Master. So, we definitely need to purchase those 2 Class 5 magical beasts at all costs, and even if we can't get both of them, then we need to get at least one. Also, the 2 Class 5 monster cores should still be on that person. Class 5 monster cores are even more precious than the bodies, and are very hard to come across in Phoenix City. Our Huangpu clan must obtain them at all costs. Tomorrow, you all will bring some men over and find out who is auctioning off the magical beasts. My lord, although the report said that the person who got the Class 5 magical beasts wasn't a strong individual, the fact that he was able to obtain them in the first place is proof that this situation isn't as simple as we thought. I am guessing that there is a high-level expert supporting him. Another white-haired elder said respectfully. Not possible. The standing middle-aged man said. The news we received was very clear-cut. These 2 Class 5 magical beasts died from battling each other before being collected. Judging from the man-made injuries inflicted onto the 2 when the monster cores were extracted, then that person isn't strong at all, so everyone's concerns aren't necessary. The Lord is truly wise. This old man was completely muddled. The elder cupped his hands together in respect, and sat back down. Okay, time is cutting short. Next up, I would like to talk about tomorrow's rearrangements. In the pitch-dark night, the Phoenix City was fairly quiet. There was only a single group of guards patrolling the streets. Now that all sorts of influential powers were gathered, the city was a mixture of the strong and the weak, so the lord of the city had no choice but to have some guards patrol the city at night just to keep the peace. Hushed discussions and commands could be heard from all over Phoenix City. All of them were related to the Class 5 magical beasts and the mysterious person putting them up for auction. The night quickly passed. Dawn broke the dark skies from the horizon, marking the opening day of the Heavenly Phoenix auction, who had long since opened their gates. The giant gates had been decorated with ribbons and lanterns as both people and workers streamed in and out of the building. In the distance, quite a few dressed-up people stood there, waiting for the auction house to open. Today was the day of the annual auction at the Heavenly Phoenix auction house. In the past, this had always been the busiest day for the Heavenly Phoenix auction house, but today, they had the rare Class 5 magical beasts for sale. This year was even livelier than the years before. Before the day had been blessed by sunshine, there were already many people waiting by the gates. After dawn, the sun rose into the air and emitted a red glow that bathed the lands in its warm light. More and more people began to gather at the Heavenly Phoenix auction house and filled up the nearby streets. Caravans found it extremely difficult to get by or find parking. Many people had been waiting for at least 2 hours before the ear-splitting sounds of a gong and firecrackers could be heard. This year's annual auction had finally begun. The auction this year wasn't like the past auctions. In the past, every person would have to buy an admission fee to participate, and this year was no exception in that regard. However, because of the Class 5 magical beasts, the admission fee this year was even more expensive than usual. Last year, the fee had been 5 gold coins, but this year, it was 10 times more expensive. The price was now 50 gold coins. Although this hike in prices made many people unhappy, it did not deter the people with money in their pockets. At the same time, it had gotten rid of the people who were merely there to watch the show and not buy anything. In this way, there was enough room for all the powers that were extremely interested in the Class 5 magical beasts. After the gates opened up for the auction house, the people that already had tickets and had been waiting outside for a very long time began to enter through the entrance in a straight line. Jian Shen had already returned to the disguise of a middle-aged man that he had wore when he had first entered the Heavenly Phoenix auction house. Slipping into the crowd, he slowly began to walk into the auction house. As he reached the inner halls of the Heavenly Phoenix auction house, a large expansive area greeted his eyes. The space was filled with neat rows of seats for as far as the eye could see. It was clear that the number of seats had surpassed 1,000. Chapter 173, The Auctioning of the Class 5 Magical Beast. The area had 2 stories worth of seats, and the 2 stories combined had a total of over 10,000 seats. Installed on the sides of every seat were dozens of private rooms for the honored guests, each separated by a tinted glass wall. From the inside they could still clearly see the outside, but no one on the outside could see what was happening on the inside. In the front was a 2-meter-tall stand where the items would be auctioned. At the moment, there was a huge piece of cloth covering the majority of the stands, making everyone unable to see what was hidden underneath. Finding a relatively isolated seat, Jian calmly sat down and waited for the auction to start. People all around him were slowly starting to settle down as well. After some time, the auction hall had been completely filled up, with every last empty spot being crowded with people standing close together. Just as the final seats were taken and everyone had settled down, a golden eruption of fireworks exploded overhead. The concealed stand up in front slowly started to ascend into the air as the red cloth on it began to rise. The mysterious items concealed were slowly revealed to the entire audience. Standing on top of the stand was an elderly man around 60 years, and in front of him was a red-colored wooden table. The elder's eyes swept the audience as he cleared his throat and loudly announced, "Honored guests, I thank you all for participating in our Heavenly Phoenix Auction House's annual auction. I, Xiao, will be the host for this year's auction, and so I hope everyone today will be able to see an item they will want to buy." The elder paused for a moment to clear his throat once more before continuing to speak. This year the Heavenly Phoenix Auction House has seen its busiest year. That is because this year we shall be auctioning off 2 precious items that our Heavenly Phoenix Auction House has already announced. What these items are, I am sure many people here are already aware of. So I, Elder Xiao, will not waste any more time describing them. Good, then I declare that the auction is now officially starting. I didn't think that the host of the auction this year would have the strength of a Saint Master. Jian muttered to himself. When the elder was speaking, he had used his saint force to magnify his voice so that everyone in the auction hall would be able to hear it. At the sound of the elder's words, 10 men suddenly walked toward the stand, encircling it. Their eyes stared coldly at the audience, as if showing off their positions as bodyguards. Afterward, a young, elegant woman slowly walked into view from behind the stand. A tray covered by a red cloth was lifted high into the air by her hand, as she skillfully walked toward the host. Carefully, she set down the tray on the table in front of the host. Honored guests, we shall now auction away the first item. What this hidden item is, I shall reveal it to you all. With that, the host extended his arm to grab the cloth and abruptly tore it away to reveal a palm-sized jade bottle. The very first item is the miraculous 100 Herbs pill. For the honored guests who are unfamiliar with this item, it is a hard-to-come-by medicine that has the healing effect of 100 herbs. In a time of crisis, this medicine can be an additional safeguard. This bottle has 5 pills of the miraculous 100 herb pill and has a starting price of 10 purple coins. Every new call will add an additional purple coin minimum. You may begin bidding. 11 purple coins. 12 purple coins. 13 purple coins. 15 purple coins. Just as the host finished speaking, the people in the audience immediately started to fight over the miraculous 100 herb pill. This medicine had a very strong healing effect that could heal not only physical wounds, but internal injuries as well. Once this pill was eaten, the wounds would quickly stabilize themselves. Although the healing effect was still vastly inferior compared to when a Radiant Saint Master healed someone, this item was still readily welcomed by everyone. Radiant Saint Masters were a rare breed in the Tianyuan continent, and with such a majestic identity, only a few influential clans would be able to have a Radiant Saint Master render their services to them. Thus, herb-based medicines were well received within the Tianyuan continent. The higher effect they had on healing, the more expensive they became. As Jian sat and watched the people around him fight for the medicine, there was a faint smile on his face. Although the miraculous 100-herb pill had a strong healing effect, he could control the Radiant Saint force just like a Radiant Saint Master, so this medicine was completely useless to him. After a fierce battle, the bottle of miraculous 100-herb pill was sold to the highest bidder for a price of 28 purple coins. People began to fight over item after item, especially for the ones that were rare and very hard to come by. Among all of these items, not a single one of them were of interest to Jian Chen. Quickly, noon came to the auction house as the auction house workers passed lunch to all of the participating guests. Although the auction itself did not cease and items continued to be sold. One by one, precious but strange treasures were sold off to the highest bidders, and soon, the auction was already reaching the ending point. Honored guests, the next item will be one of the last 2 items for this year, and is also one of the items everyone is most interested in. The host suddenly stopped speaking as his eyes swept over the audience. Almost as if everyone was one huge collective consciousness, the whole audience concentrated on the stand up front. The host began to smile. It can be said that these items are what everyone has been anticipating for a very long time. With that then, I, Elder Xiao, will not speak anymore. Come, bring the item up. Just as he finished speaking, a few lumber workers came up onto the stall with a stretcher. As soon as they appeared, everyone in the audience zoomed in on the stretcher. There was a huge black cloth covering the stretcher, making it so that no one could see what was underneath it. However, there was a huge protrusion underneath the cloth that allowed many people to guess just what was being hidden. The men slowly lowered the stretcher onto the table and left the stand. Strolling toward the table, the host stooped over and placed a hand on the black cloth. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.